Wait. Oh, yours does, okay, well, let's go back out. All right, I'll call to order the committee of the whole meeting at 5:30. Is there anything for the order? Review of regular meeting agenda. Got quite a few items on the consent. It's always good to know if there's anything that you had big questions about. I'm gonna need you to pull it just so we can kind of do that. Anything of note there? Not seeing any. All right. So we'll go ahead and move on to our discussion item, which is sign code policy direction with our senior planner, Brady. Yes.
Thank you. So just to introduce myself, because there are a few new faces. I'm Troy Davis, and this is your planning to Duval. Been here almost 9 years, so seen people come and go, but I'm still here. So anyway, good to be here tonight. Tonight I want to address the council on the sign code update. As you know, that we're working on. This was a solid project, unfortunately, solid no longer with us, so I'm taking over the project to help push it through the finish line here. We did meet with the planning commission a couple weeks ago to discuss some outstanding items on this topic. So if you can go to the next slide or
Just fine.
okay. So we asked them a series of about 6 questions that we needed additional information on. Most of this will be brought forward later on as we kind of draft the code and get into more of a more solid draft. But our main question for the group tonight is question number 4. I'm sorry, these are bullet points and not numbers, but it's, do we want to regulate commercial and non-commercial temporary signs the same way? Or do we want to regulate them separately? So when we asked the planning commission this, they were for the most part on board with regulating commercial signage in a different manner than non-commercial signage. As you can see, now 4-1. So the one commissioner that was cool with kind of the quid pro quo, how we were doing things of going to content neutral basis, which was commercial signs we would regulate as you know, in a content neutral manner. So again, we've had some issues, and the reason why we're asking this question is because we've had some issues as we continue to draft this. So essentially we have a situation, let's see if I can describe this, but essentially like when you describe temporary commercial signage in a content neutral manner, it gets really tricky because now we're not treating other agencies differently or different sign types differently. We're treating them all the same. So what this does is that we end up in a situation where certain industries, rather than I'll just pick on the real estate industry, it's a easy one to pick on. But essentially, what that ends up doing is it puts certain industries in situations where they don't enjoy the same type of signage rights that they traditionally had. And then it also opens up the door to allow signage, displays and type of signs that traditionally haven't been utilized by other businesses. So you can see an expansion of signs in certain areas. So what it does is basically restrict traditional use of signage that is out there, and then encourages, you know, non-traditional sign types that haven't been utilized to be utilized, because it's really hard to narrow it down to the industry type. So in that convoluted way of saying it, essentially, if we go back to how we currently regulate temporary commercial signs by content, it's much easier, because then we can say, hey, real estate signs are subject to these rules, construction signs are subject to these rules, new community subdivisions are subject to these rules, and it's much easier to I guess implement our objectives with temporary signage. So that's kind of how that works in a nutshell. Again, that's how our code is currently written. And we're just kind of noting kind of this problem as we go on, so we would like some feedback on that. And then the second component of that is, instead of a sign permit for some types of signs, we could consider yearly sign agreements. So if we went the more content neutral route, where we didn't look at content, what we could utilize are sign agreements, and this is for use of signs, particularly within rights of way. So instead of like, you know, if you were, again, picking on the real estate industry, if we were in the real estate industry, what we would do is we would grab a sign agreement with a broker, and then all the agents working under that broker would utilize that agreement. So say you had an open house, you know, under that agreement, you'd have the authority to put out open house signs during your open house, as opposed to that each agent getting their own separate sign permit to do something like that. As the code is currently written, we don't require real estate signs to get permits. So you know, you can have an open house, you can put a house on the market, no permits required. When we go the content neutral route and we start requiring permits in order to regulate time, place, and manner, this is where it gets a little, this is one of those instances where it gets a little tricky, because it's like, do we want real estate agents to have to go sign a permit before having an open house, you know, per se? That can be really tricky and problematic for the industry, because when they have an open house, for example, you know, typically a house comes on the market, right, and within just a few days, they want to have an open house for that house. They don't have time to come to the city, apply for a permit, you know, and us process it and give them their permit before they have their open house. So that's just, and again, I don't mean to pick on the real estate industry, it's just these two, but those are some of the problems that kind of come down with it. And so one of the solutions to kind of get around that problem, again, is the sign agreement method, where we would just say, hey, if you're Windermere or your Remax, your broker comes in, you apply for a blanket signing agreements, your agents on you operate under that agreement, which regulates time, place, and manner of the signs. Yeah, you know, and then they're good to go, and you know, come in for special permits. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to kind of regulate things and signage, especially temporary signage. It's just, it's kind of a headache, because you already realize it's just a matter of how do we as a community want to regulate temporary signs. Again, staff and planning commission are okay with regulating temporary commercial signs in a content specific manner. And again, we're just talking about commercial signage. Non-commercial signage we still regulate in a non-content, in a content neutral manner, because of what the Supreme Court issue has come down. And so
Troy, we had a hand, are you having questions throughout, or?
well, I'm pretty much kind of wrapped up, so it's really questions 4 and 5 that we kind of need some of your thoughts on, feedback on.
Okay. Councilmember Mercer, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll sort of stick to the one question, where I have a second sort of ask, but I'll save that till we've gone through sort of one round. I note on here, you know, the recommendation or the proposed by staff was to actually do the content neutral, but then you said that's more complicated in your comments. So I wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. And then 2 is, yes, I understand or it's related, I guess the actual question is, I know the Supreme Court ruling was specifically sort of on the non-commercial component. Obviously, we've had a lot of rulings in the last week, a lot of these favor industry. Is there any exposure by continuing to sort of to not go content neutral in terms of the commercial, like, you know, is the real estate trade group versus sort of the Master Builders Association, you know, could we ultimately get into an issue where restrictions are impacting one business, or they want to do a certain thing? I just want to make sure that we're being proactive in terms of the approach, but also understanding that there is more, even though content neutral seems like it should be simpler, there is some complexity, you know, because it would be a change from what we do today. So I don't know if my question made sense, Troy, but that's sort of the 2 pieces: is validating staff's initial recommendation why you had that, and then also understanding if we did separate them or left them as is there any potential, exposure down the road, or should we just, pull the Band-Aid off and make the change now, as when we do it for non-commercial?
Yeah, those are great questions. So, yeah, our first initial kind of understanding of the ruling was that with temporary signage, we would just go content neutral, that would be kind of the easiest blanket route to go. To do that, and it would help us create parallel structure in our code for both commercial signs and non-commercial signs, temporary. And so we just we rolled out with that kind of promotion, but as we've gotten through and farther into the process, we've noticed that, hey, when we regulate these temporary commercial signs in a content neutral manner, it gets incredibly tricky. And so what that does is it could end up where the content neutral temporary commercial sign regulations that we create could create some unanticipated problems. We could end up in situations where, a certain industry that wants to do something that they've traditionally done suddenly can't, or they have to jump through more hoops, or there's just or we've missed something. So I mean that's a potential kind of fallout. It's not the end of the world. I mean, we can stay content neutral with commercial signage. It's just a little bit more tricky and can result in some unforeseen problems that we may not anticipate. So that's typically why our recommendation in planning commission's direction is to kind of stick with the status quo in terms of regulating temporary commercial signage by industry type and by content, so that we can keep those regulations clear. We would still propose some amendments, of course, to the language for temporary commercial signage if we stayed with content, looking at the content, just because there's, in the use of our code, there's some, problems that come up, happens with every code. So we would do our best to kind of amend those, fix those problems. We would keep it, focused on content. So that I think would be more satisfactory and predictable for our commercial industries. It would make it easier for them to navigate our code language, and it would be less feather ruffling avenue to go. Not that we're afraid to ruffle feathers, but it totally depends on the direction the city wants to go to.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Thank you. And obviously it doesn't preclude future changes, if we decide it needs to be different. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Supple?
Your yearly sign agreement, is that something that other cities implemented?
Yeah, so a few cities have. I believe the city of Snoqualmie has. I apologize, I haven't dived too deep into this because I just inherited this project, but I believe they're one of several that use it within the region here. And that's because I think in terms of updating their sign code, I think they kind of went towards that content neutral manner too. And so again, it kind of creates that issue of utilizing the public right-of-way space. And so what a sign agreement is it's very similar to just a sign permit. And instead of granting that sign permit to an individual agent, per se, in the real estate field, we would be granting it to the broker. And so all the agents that work under that broker would work under that permit approval for that agreement. So when they did their open houses, whatever that agreement said, they would all be subject to those same rules. So instead of each of them having to get their own permit for approval, then that way it allows them to continue, to do their open houses when they need to, and the time they need to, and not have to wait on the city to get permits.
I can help with there's some cities I work for where they did go down the route of the master. They call it the master sign. And normally you see it in commercial areas. So in one particular city, they have a lot of very large industrial areas in which the tenants were different businesses, and they were required to do that, to provide a master sign plan, and it is like an agreement, and they have to that gets taken care of. And that's where you can deal with, for example, ADA risks, public safety, all that kind of stuff, so. And then, that's how they addressed it. I never saw any problems. I reviewed many permits.
Councilmember Napoli and then Schaefer.
Yeah, when I look at these questions, I definitely think it would be very, very difficult to have a content neutral sign code. Just, the circumstances that a business might need it, to function, just wouldn't apply to someone who just personally wants to put signs out. It just, the circumstances are so different, and to allow businesses to operate, it just, I can't even comprehend how it can be done. It'd be interesting to see a city that was able to succeed.
Yeah.
So just for practicality, I feel like separating commercial and non-commercial makes sense. And I also think the yearly sign agreement could reduce staff time of just, you know, and really the burden to the user who needs to get the sign permit. That seems like a lot of work. Every open house, for example, to come in and figure out which one you get seems on the road. If we try to make them do that, that'd be so. So, let's see, you said the last two questions were the ones that you needed. You have on?
No,
Oh, the two from the last.
Yeah. The two up
Yeah.
from the last two.
Yeah, so I guess I can answer those
Sure.
questions
Yeah.
then. Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, there's a couple of clarification questions if I can. First of all, I agree with staff and the planning commission on bullet list number 4. That seems pretty cut and dry to me. See, as far as bullet item number 5, similar permit for types of signs considered yearly sign agreement. Right, this is my clarifying question. Right now, we don't require permit for the wire signs that they put out open houses. Is that-
The stake sign, you're talking about the stake sign, like the little.
Yeah,
Yeah, technically, they're not supposed to. Right now, our code is not too conducive for that. And so we kind of turned a blind eye to.
okay.
To that.
This would at the very least require a yearly.
Right, yeah, and in the agreement, we would specify, you know, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and so. If the city was okay with stake signs, for example,
Yeah.
you know, where they put those little, what are they like 2 feet by 6 inches, you know. If we were okay with the utilization of those signs, then yeah, that we would put that in the agreement, that if we weren't okay, the agreement, we wouldn't include that sign.
Okay, so yeah, and I like the idea of the yearly agreement because it gives us a little bit more power to regulate that, hopefully not increasing staff effort. And I'm most interested in the planning commission's recommendation for the very last bullet. Because we've all seen signs where we're staking the 10 feet apart along the road, right? I don't think we want that here. So I'm sure the planning commission will come up with something on that. So I'll be interested in it. Thank you.
Councilmember Pickle, do you want to weigh in? I think that having enough.
I don't have a problem with open house signs, if you're looking for a house and you're looking to the area, you need to know where to turn, if there's right around, and every state sign I've seen picked up usually after, but I don't know one did yet. So I really have a problem. And just to provide you with context, because I was at some of the meetings when someone was doing this kind of stuff, one of the things that we have, it happened in the first year that I was here last year, and it was that some signs were out. But they were blocking the pathway, and someone had filed a complaint because they had a disability that sign prevented them from navigating. So that's where the issue came. But I just wanted to make sure. Yeah. Sorry. Exactly, right. And that's where you come up with the public safety, being able to say what you want to say.
And that was one of the key, sorry, can we go back to the slide?
Sure.
So yeah, bullet point number one. So in our purpose section, we asked them, hey, should we add more to our purpose section? And safety and visual clutter were one of some feedback we got from the planning commission. So they were really keen on that. So in addition to adding, statements in the purpose section regarding, safety, we can also add regulatory language in there too, like Naomi brought up, to help ensure that especially when the right of way is utilized for these temporary signs, that we're not jeopardizing people's ability to navigate, particularly with ADA. And so that's a good point.
Yeah, and I would just say, I agree also, with the planning commission, the overall things of this, I think that could be, but I mean, this can remain somewhat fluid and we can adapt as time goes on, right? And if it's working great, if not, then we need to look at it again. I like the idea of the yearly sign agreement, knowing that some people in certain businesses, not to pick on certain ones, but they really rely on that. And that, I think one of the public comments we had received, that would help remedy that as well. Interesting too, right? You could work in if somebody is breaking the rules, they could get a warning, and maybe their agreement might be threatened to not be re-signed, so it really encourage good behavior with those. And then if I know you mentioned it, it's not really on here, but or maybe allow for type of sign, the skateboards, I know they're essential, they can get pretty heavy. I mean, I'm not opposed to the little stick-in ones. I mean, it seems like those are a lot more very, as long as they're placed appropriately. And again, I think a sign agreement could, really help with that, and help make sure people are following those rules. And then I know there will be more discussion with planning commission and staff, but, when you look at how many signs are allowed, I think most people in certain industries are quite reasonable with the amount of signs. Every now and again, you see some get really, really crazy with the number. But I don't know if you'd look at things like what's the size of the property, like maybe it's not just one house, but maybe it's a whole development. Like, does that weigh into how many things you would allow and how far out and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so the sign agreement would essentially stick to signage that's placed within the public right of way. So not temporary signage that's utilized on private property, just within the public right of way. And so what we would have is the agreement would be standard. So we're treating everyone that's utilizing the same. So with that agreement, we're just basically saying, hey, these are the rules that you agree to follow. These are the rules that your agents agree to follow. And the great thing, I think you mentioned, that ends up kind of being self-policing in a way, because if we do get complaints, that kind of puts everyone under that brokerage in jeopardy, of losing that agreement, and us revoking that, so that they, can't be putting their signs out. And that's typically what we need help with, as much self-regulating as we can encourage, the more it helps us. Just because, again, I think, obviously we don't have a sort of sign code or code enforcement officer at the moment. But even if we did, signage, depending on how our regulations are worded, can really consume a lot of staff time in terms of enforcement. And we definitely want to create a situation where the community feels that the rules are fair. Because when they feel they're fair, the more we follow them. If we can get them with agreements where they're more self-policing, that encourages them to follow the rules. So, yeah. So, and just to point out too, sorry to sidetrack a little bit, but sign code agreements, we can utilize that whether we go content neutral or not. So it's not just tied to if we go content neutral, then we can utilize sign agreements. We can do it any other way. So I'll make sure that's clear.
Any other questions?
I had one sort of follow-up, Amy. One, I just wanted to sort of weigh in on that particular issue. I'm also in alignment. I like the idea of the sign agreement. I think it adds some accountability. It is a tool, that provides staff with some additional resources. The one follow-up question I sort of had for Troy or a recommendation is just in terms of, I know we still have issues with sort of enforcement and even outside of the permit, are they pulling the signs when they're supposed to? Are they in the right of way? Are there more than they're supposed to have? Is there anything in the code that requires the listing of the permit number on the actual sign? If not, I would sort of ask for that. I think that would also help with accountability if, we go out and there's a sign and it's a question if it's got a permit or not. We know if it has a permit number on it, that provides a link back to, a lookup at the staff level in terms of follow-up. But, just again, if that hasn't been considered, I'd sort of put that out there as well as a.
Yeah, no, that's great. Concern. So, or couple members, sorry. Wrong button. Yes, so, right now, technically, with our A-board signs, we have approval stickers. That applicants are supposed to put on their signs, and that lets us know, hey, right off the bat, whether they come in or not. That the administration of that has kind of been a little bit challenging in some ways and inconsistent, I think, in the time that I've been here. But that's not to say that it isn't effective. So even even with if we did a signed agreement, we're utilizing for commercial signs in the right of way, we could definitely do that where we're putting those approval stickers on there or requiring them to. That is, of course, not a cost. Something that the city we need to think about. We would need to print, obviously have a stash of stickers on the end. Not that it's a big expensive thing. But yeah, we could definitely utilize that like that as well, just so that it's obvious. I mean, those stickers we'd likely require to be put on the back side of the signs. The only kind of situation where it gets a little bit tricky is where we've got double-sided signs.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and again, I'm not prescriptive in terms of how you do it. Just I'm trying to think from make it easier. Obviously, there's a cost, but also to, if we're going to go through the extra steps of having these agreements and they extend beyond, just short timelines, they can go over a 12-month period. It's be helpful to be able to associate those back to the agreement. Question.
Yeah, we could definitely do something. It would be like hard hats, 2024. So, but yeah, we could consider something like that for sure.
Right, any other questions? All right, I don't see. Well, thank you very much. Move on to a review of council procedures on attendance with our city administrator.
Good afternoon, evening. City administrator, I don't have a presentation. Tonight, we did put in the packet, the two pieces of information you need, one of which is W that lays out, for our form of government here in the city of Duval, the attendance requirements for council and council meetings. And then secondly, an excerpt from our council procedures on attendance. So the question that was raised at the last meeting and Mayor Pro Tem agreed to bring tonight is, do you want to amend the council procedures to account for other forms of used attendance for conferences? So right now, it's pretty vague. It's within your council procedure to be more enumerative, list exactly what is required. You can keep it vague. So just here to facilitate a conversation on what you would like to do with your council procedures, if you would like to make them.
Well, I can go ahead and start if unless anyone else wants to jump in. I think for me, I know some of the discussion or some of the comments that I put before were about we're about, what would be an excused absence and would work. For me, I would only be okay with emergency or unforeseen circumstance type of work situation. I wouldn't want it to be for me personally. Well, I am gonna take a big order that I have to make, and so I need to miss this meeting to make it and deliver it and do all that. Because if I was doing that enough, should that be excused when I'm not here to vote and do what the people that voted me in to do, the job? I want council to be accessible to as many different people and as much diversity as possible, but there are instances where you might have a job that just conflicts too much with the specific times, and we're not talking about committee meetings, we're not talking about committee of the whole, we're not talking about special meetings or any of that. We're just talking about those regularly scheduled meetings. And I also feel like the state law bar is already quite low. If you missed, as many as you could consecutively without triggering the state thing for attendance, I think you would only need to come, assuming we didn't cancel any meetings for the year. I think you would only need to attend 8 out of, the 24 meetings or something like that. It's pretty, and 3 consecutive is like a month and a half, right? So anyways, my thoughts are, if something urgent happens at work, like someone's coworker's father passes away and you're the only one who could step in and help. To me, that's an extenuating emergency circumstance, and it totally makes sense that, okay, let's excuse that. For me, last month, had we not do the AWC conference and all that, canceled the one council meeting, I was gonna miss it because I was planning and running the 8th grade dance, and that didn't need to be excused. I mean, that's me choosing kids and family over, but I mean, that's not an excuse either, unless my child's, right? I mean, that kind of thing. So I think it's just deciding where the line is, and I would be comfortable adding work emergencies if that helps. I am not comfortable just adding plan. So how about I start the conversation there and see if anyone else wants to chime in? Councilmember Mercer?
Yeah, so, I think I've had a work, issue covering for a coworker, that one I could have sort of slotted under the death because it was a death of a coworker's family member that then triggered work on my plate. But there's some wiggle room in some of these. I think where you're going, Amy, and I sort of agree, is in general, like around the vacation, because there's an opportunity to plan vacation or discretionary obligations or other things, and I'm comfortable, I think, with the not necessarily having those things excused, even in the case of the work emergency, because I would not expect to have 3 of those in a row. And so you're gonna hit, you could hit one. I think where the area that I potentially would like to consider amending, and I think it sort of touched on the example you gave in terms of over the course of the year, is we have no cap on the maximum number of absences either. And so I think you could game the system and not hit 3 in a row, but miss the majority of meetings in a given 12-month period. And I would like to see some upper limit so that people, think twice about the commitment that they need to make to the council role. But that's sort of just me. My 2 thoughts are I'm going to have issues occasionally, and we're going to have to miss. I don't see them missing more than 3 in a row, so I'm comfortable with the limited scope that's provided there today. But it does give me pause a little bit that there's no maximum, because I had thought even on the planning commission there was also an upper limit in terms of the number of meetings you could miss in a 12-month period, and that's something maybe I'd propose that we include. But my 2 cents.
Thank you. Councilmember Necklin?
Yeah, I agree with what you said on your question, and I think that if your job is routinely having 3 meetings in a row are, then you might need to find another opportunity to serve. Role of council member, we need to be at meetings during the presentation and plugged in. So I agree with more of a emergency type work obligation versus something that is as a part of your job. And then on the upper cap, I'm not sure if legally council could do that. To the upper cap, I feel like I think we should check with legal, because I kind of have the impression that council can't make a rule of dismissing another council member. Like the only way council member gets dismissed is that so our discretion is whether we excuse.
So
Maybe,
yeah,
maybe,
just
top
on
of your head.
yeah.
I was wondering.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to impose anything. Again, I was
Oh,
just,
yeah.
you know, it's something that if the concern is about, you know, regular participation, as you, I think you did the math last time, Amy, and you could like miss a lot of meetings and still not miss 3 in a row, but that might be, not be something we can monitor or control, so.
So we did look into that question because, not in the situation that was presented, so but several months. Question was raised, why you don't we have on, like, and, you know, related to, you know, both cultural commission, planning commission, council. Commissions are a little different, you can create different rules for the commissions. These are elected commissions, and absent, excusable. There is no way other than a statute, which is a very new, 3 rule that could effectively terminate a council member's term other than operation of the public.
Thank you, that helps.
Commissions are a little different because they're not.
Councilmember Sokol?
Yeah, so the way I read this. You can still miss a meeting or work or whatever, you just won't be given an excuse, right? So it's just like, there's 1 mark against you. You miss 2 more without an excuse, then you're no longer on the council, but. I don't know if we need to add any more examples of what they could cause for absence would be. I mean, I'm kind of happy with the way it is written. You know, someone's has a work emergency. Well, sorry, you don't get an excuse in the meeting, you know. I don't know where that keeps a tally, who keeps a tally on that.
The clerk keeps attendance.
Okay.
And so if we get the meeting minutes, every
Yeah.
meeting, you'll see a tally of who was present and who wasn't, and then if council at that meeting voted to excuse, you would see the absences excused in that meeting minutes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you're basically allowed up to 2 consecutive unexcused absences. And still keep your job, so I'm okay with the way it is.
I'm just, Councilmember Shaker.
Yeah, first of all, I agree with Councilmember Suttle that, I don't want to really make this more specific. I think, the council needs some discretion on what to decide, because there's always extenuating circumstances on things. We try to be too specific, with our examples. I think it will, work against us. So what we have there is fine with me. I would actually like to add at the end of paragraph C, something to the effect that council will decide the exact circumstances, whether it deserves to be excused or something to that effect.
I want to check in really quick with Councilmember People and then we'll go to non.
Just to clarify. It's only vacant if you fail to attend 3 consecutive, meetings, 2, and then be here for a month, and then. Everybody to, yeah.
Councilmember Nelson, you want to go?
I just want to read that, the scenario that occurred to where we're having this conversation, and I think what was difficult about it is that, there was a council member caught off guard. And so I don't know if there would be a way to add into these, procedures that once a council member has reached 2 unexcused absences in a row, that the rest of the clerk will alert the rest of the council, just to, and the council member who had missed, just to give them a heads up, to just. I don't know if that's too much to keep track of, but I really, I felt bad about how things happened. I think everyone did. And, I just really need that to have someone else.
Did you understand?
I don't think it's a workload issue. I do want to be very careful about administration's role. It is our role to keep minutes. It is not our role to manage the internal affairs of council. And so I think it crosses the line a bit to have the clerk more or less manage the internal affairs of council.
But,
I'm gonna go to.
yeah.
Yeah, I think if I understood Councilmember Schaefer's suggestion, I think the fact that an absent may be excused by a motion second and majority vote of the council members kind of answers the question or the statement that you wanted to add on, because that's who's basically deciding, right? I suppose we could, if we wanted to, say, someone came in and said, hey, I got a work emergency, I know it's not part of the excused absences. Could the council then say, okay, we're gonna vote on this and say, okay, in light of the situation, we'll make this an excused absence without having to go in and rewrite this.
Yeah, one of the things that we changed recently is that on your meeting agenda now, under B roll call, you'll always see the word absences under subpart 1, to just remind you all to have that conversation. So it's just a trigger for you all to reflect on, you can ask us, myself, or the clerk, if we received any information about absences. And just a reminder for you all to, make those motions, make those votes, so that you all aren't caught.
And then I think you had your hand up again, and then we'll go.
Yeah, a lot of the fact that we've now added that to agenda, I think will be a big help to kind of revisit what happened to Councilmember Isaacson. No, he was caught up with the rest of the council, I think was caught up as well. And under the circumstances, maybe we would have excused the absence, even though it was his third absence. I'm not sure, but we weren't given that opportunity. So this, I think, having that as a standard discussion item will prevent that from happening.
Okay, Councilmember Mercer.
Yeah, so I want to sort of be careful on how I frame this, because it sort of ties back to the max cap. I want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to serve who served and I acknowledge what Councilmember Schaefer just said. I think, there were some things caught on guard. It wasn't intentional, things triggered. That said, I'm not trying to think of the way to say this the right way. Like, these should be the exceptions and not the rule. So I do think, like, whether it's the emergency term, but if we're going to use emergency, that should be defined somewhere. What is an emergency? Because I could say, if it's around work scheduling or missing it for work, I would hate to see a case where you miss it and then the council excuses that and then another council member has it and it's not excused. Like, it's the way it's framed now, it's kind of clear like what those things are: death in the family. When we start getting into sort of squishier excuses, I'm more comfortable just not having those be excused, noting them, and then, not hitting the 3 mark, because I do think we run into a little risk around subjective enforcement. If we get into, I think Councilmember Schaefer, you made a comment about like, we can ultimately subject to the council. It's like, yes, in terms of the motion to approve, but we should be voting along whether or not to excuse it based on a defined set of criteria. That's only my only concern there, because I would just want to make sure that it's applied fairly and equitably. And once you start expanding the definitions, it gets a little square. Does that make sense? I hopefully, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'll go and then I'll check back in on you if you have anything else. Well, the one thing that caught me off guard was assuming that there was an opportunity for retroactive excusal, like of the immediate last meeting, because what if something was going on and you didn't know? I mean, that someone, but again, like the things we've talked about, that would have to have been the third in a row, right? But I was wondering, you know, if we recheck with Oscar about the wording on that and possibly add it just so that, you know, future councils are aware that, you know, if there is no retroactive excusals for, you know, past meetings, that's documented there, so it's easier for councils to find that. And, oh, go ahead.
So that I can realize, you probably spend a ton of time with council procedure before every meeting. And it's very easy to add a couple just details to the agenda, which is in front of you at every meeting, to just put in, you know, retroactive excusal is not permitted.
So you're saying instead of adding it in our procedures, putting.
You can put it in both, but just, I mean, it's kind of just a quick review.
Okay.
Because I know it's taking away council procedures are 45 pages long.
Yeah.
I know they a lot of
We read it every night. Okay. So that was one thought I had, and then I'm kind of like going around and around with some of the things that have been said. I was just saying I'm open to adding work emergencies under it, but rereading it again, you know, Councilmember Supple's point about the very first sentence, and then how it explains examples of good cause include, but that it really is pointing to us having a discussion about it, because there might be things that are fairly specific that fall into the same line as what's characterized here, but maybe is, you know, exceptionally different, or, you know, something really bizarre, but was severe enough that somebody had this. So, with those, I think it does a good job of painting a picture of what kinds of things, should qualify to help guide council on that discussion. So I'd be fine with leaving it how it is, essentially, is what I'm saying. I'll check in with Councilmember Kufelt really quick, and then I think it's up.
be there, but 5 minutes before you leave work, you broke your ankle and go to the emergency room, and you didn't have time to call. Would that be retroactive? Can't retroactively excuse it. But be here. So assuming that wasn't the time, then it's fine, and I think, you know, that's what the RCW. What it doesn't say, but assumes, is that most times you're not going to get to 3 unexcused. And that it's actually okay if, you know, it's a beautiful day today, and if a council member decides like, you know, today I'm going to spend time planting flowers with my grandchildren, that's okay. It doesn't have to be, every absence doesn't have to be excused. It's just if it was your 3rd unexcused, we didn't hear from you and you broke your ankle. Well, we might have to put the position back up, but we would hope that we would never.
I think I saw another hand. Oh, go ahead, Councilmember.
Yeah, I feel like when we spoke about this, the last, that retroactive was allowed as long as the 3rd one triggered the excusal, because that is automatic, you cannot do it. So I think that I thought I heard that. So in the example that Councilmember Kufelt, let's say, you know, that happened, you get in the car and on the way to the company, you can't call. And so they aren't excused because you haven't heard from them, and you're like, I don't know why that person's not here, they're not excused, they're missing. But then you find out subsequently that had a car accident at that meeting, as long as the 3rd hadn't been triggered and they're automatically dismissed, you could retroactively, because I think someone asked that question maybe when our attorney was here, and he was like, well, once the 3rd is triggered, it's just over. But anyway, so maybe we could get clarification on that.
No, Councilmember Nevins.
Okay.
Is 1 and 2 can be retroactively excused, the 3rd cannot.
Yes, okay,
Because the law applies the minute the absence happened.
Okay.
right.
Makes sense.
So it wouldn't be in our policy that says you've got retroactively, it's just once the 3rd triggered.
The law now is operational.
Other thoughts?
Well, perhaps, you know, this could be made clear to the new council member when they come on board. Be advised that, you know, you have so many excused and non-excused absences before, you know, you're in trouble.
The only other thing that got brought up as we've been discussing that I wanted clarification on where the rest of council fits, I can't remember, I think it was maybe Councilmember Schaefer mentioned someone tracking. You know, I have the same concerns with like a staff member doing it. It's not a mayor pro tem thing, though certainly council could decide, mayor pro tem, that's the task we want you to do. But also I feel each individual should be tracking their own stuff and be responsible for it. It just puts a lot of load. Any additional task really makes it harder to just be a council member, you know, and do your own thing. And so I wanted to know, because that was brought up, you know, what the rest of council thought about that. And like I said, my opinion is we should be tracking our own stuff. And I should know if I've missed 2 in a row and ooh, I better make sure I'm there next time. But Councilmember Flynn.
So who would be tracking, you know, for this? Because it sounds like unless you had asked a question,
Right.
no one would have gone back. So someone has to have a job. Keeping track, or we could inadvertently allow someone to have absences and not. Because no one's paying attention. So like someone's job has to be paying attention to that. I don't know who it would be, but. Because we don't want to accidentally break the law by not knowing. I don't know whose role that is. Any thoughts on that? Maybe find out what other cities do, I don't know.
We will do that.
Did you wanna?
We will reach out.
We can ask that question and see how other cities handle it. I just want to be very careful about the role of administration, council affairs. And not create too many political lines.
Anything else on that? So it's sounding like we're keeping it as it is, right? I didn't miss that note. Okay, all right, so we're going to go ahead and keep it as it is, and we'll look into that other issue and see what we can find out. All right, so we'll move on to our last item, which is presentation on environmental sustainability elements with our senior planner.
All right, there's a PowerPoint that's going to come up in a minute, but I think I know everybody here, so to give you a heads up, this presentation is not detailed. There's no work or there aren't any questions that will be presented to you tonight. This is just the first touch so you can see what it's looking like. And for anyone that isn't obsessed with comprehensive plans and has every piece and structure of a comprehensive plan memorized, we'll just always revisit that. It's necessarily not. Next slide. So we're only going to talk about 4 different things tonight. I'm going to try to make this brief because you have a big report ahead of you this evening. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just revisit what an element is. I'm sure you've heard that many times. And so I want to go in and kind of define that first, because it's a term that doesn't get frequently used throughout the rest of the planning policy. And then, of course, a reminder of where we're at. And then we'll take a quick look at what the environment and sustainability element looks like, and then leave some space open for questions and answers at the end. Next. So just as a reminder, the comprehensive plan is the master document that is made up of multiple chapters. Each chapter is an element, and the different chapters just listed very quickly. Does anybody want me to go back to that slide, or be all good? Everybody's okay? All right, excellent. Okay, so the first question I want to answer, whether someone had asked it or not, is, well, what's an element? Why do we call it an element? Why don't we just call it a chapter? I don't know the history of the term element, but it functions like a chapter. it has to have a couple of key things. Every element that you're going to see come before you that is in draft form, it needs to have some type of analysis. It has to have goals, and those goals have to have policies associated with it. So that's the three big pieces. Next slide. So when we say analysis, you know, what does that mean? You have analysis that you can do mathematically, you can have more squishy analysis with policy language. And so there's a couple of questions we always ask when we're performing analysis for policy, proposed policy or amended policy. And the first thing is, what does the data tells us? So that's statistics, population numbers, that sort of thing, capacity. Then we look at the existing rules. Do the existing rules still work? Do they comply with current legislation? And then we look at the current laws. And then finally, with public engagement, although it's fun and it's great and it's wonderful, it also tells us something. And that something is, how do people feel about this? And then we blend all of those things together as far as performing an analysis, coming to some type of conclusion. Next slide. So after analysis, the other thing that you're going to see, and you don't necessarily see analysis first, sometimes it's interspersed depending on the topic, the goals. And so you'll see in the draft document that you have particular goals, and those goals have to be consistent not only with state law, they have to be consistent with policies at the county level and sometimes at the regional level too, depending on the topic. So with goals consistent with the law, they have to reflect public feedback. So you can have something that's consistent with the law, but it can be worded so it also reflects what the public wishes for and what the feedback is from council and planning commission as well. And then it's responsive to data. So it's not entirely ignoring what the numbers are telling us. It needs to do those three things. Next thing. And then finally, you have the policies, goals, policies, very, you know, broad language. But the goal is, this is what we want to do. The policies are, this is how we're going to do it. It's more specific and action based. And then the regulations are based on the policies, and the regulations are, this is how we're going to do it. And within this scope, at this time, at this place, under these circumstances. Next slide. Crystal clear so far? I know this is really exciting, but necessary. So this is where we're at. Not all the information is on there. I'll bring this up every time I'm presenting any information on any of the elements for July 2nd. We're looking at one of the elements now. Moving forward, just because there's a time constraint, you'll probably get 2 elements per meeting. And so we'll run through them pretty quickly. And touch on some of the key items that are really important. Next slide. Nope, you're good. I know I put a lot of bells and whistles. There's like automated animation, just try to keep it exciting. So just as a reminder, those are all the other elements. They all fit together in this pie, but tonight we're going to look at the environmental sustainability, and its acronym is ES. So you'll see that in the document. You'll see the different acronyms that represent each element. Next slide. And so here we are with environment and sustainability element. As I showed earlier, you're going to see analysis, goals, and policies in that chapter, i.e. element. The little green dots that appeared under policies represent all of the different policies. And so when you're looking at this draft document, you'll see the same with the other elements. To the left in the column, you see all those different policies, and those policies fall under a goal. Now, to the right, you see all of those acronyms. Each one of those acronyms represents a different element. So you'll see LU for land use, for example. And so what you'll see that's different in these draft documents that's not in the previous, which is the current comprehensive plan, is that we want to be able to show that if there is a policy, it is also directly connected to a policy in the land use element, that it crosses pathways with, I wish I had my glasses on, the housing element. So they're not separate, they're very connected. It's kind of like mycelium or any other network. There's many connections between the policies, and that's one of the things that we do is when we read through the different policies and we say, these two policies say the same thing. Do we really need to have two policies that say the same thing? Or can we say it in one portion of the document and then direct the reader to the other elements to say, these are all connected? So that way there's less reading, it's more succinct, less confusing. So that's one of the goals we're trying to achieve that you'll see. Next slide. Now, for those of us that are more visually driven, this is another example of what how they all work together. So it's just like the other portion that I showed you, but you can see here that whatever element we're talking about, how it's connected to everything else. Next slide. So every element will be different because it's different topics, but the way the environment and sustainability element is organized, it's organized into 3 themes. The first one is, you will have noticed it's pretty lean because that's the area that's going to discuss climate and resiliency, which is a future element that you'll see coming up in the next couple of years. The second theme focuses on the natural environment, and then the final theme focuses on shoreline management, which it has its own universe of shoreline management. Next slide. So some key things that we wanted to point out that's new, that's reflective of some of the new legislation is under theme 1, one of the new pieces of legislation that came through was the wildland urban interface, and that has to do with those cities that have that semi-rural character that's close to a big forested area that's at risk for fire. And how do we deal with having policies and regulations in which the homes that are being constructed in the way that the city is planned creates an extra layer of protection to the homes that are at risk for exposure to wildfires that are nearby. Next slide. Under theme 2, we have a couple pieces here, and I really should have brought the correct glasses. I'm not trying to be cool, but these are prescriptions, so this will help. So you see the wildland urban interface again, and then the use of compost, that has to do with public works projects. So it's not, we're going to be mandating, this isn't a recommendation to mandate every private household to use compost. This is where there's big projects under public works, and this is an option to do that. Then there's also a policy for protecting trees, which aligns with the current regulations that we have in the code. And then you can see further down, retrofitting the existing development and infrastructure to adapt to climate change. This is due to House Bill 1181, which also asks for a new element, which was climate resiliency, which will be coming later. So we're anticipating the new element that's going to be coming in. And so that's where those policies are, is just putting that in there for now. Funding opportunities and of course, disproportionate impacts on people of color. I want to explain that because you're going to see that theme come up in the other elements. So the disproportionate impacts on people of color, as you'll see in other elements, is more as it pertains to the environment element. The best example I can give you isn't here on the West Coast. It's on the East Coast, where you have, for example, a lot of hog farms. And so an example of a disproportionate impact is where you have an area of a city or a county where you have individuals that are living, for example, in an area that is being impacted by neighboring. So the zoning is set up so that you have residential units right next to a hog farm, and there, I know this is kind of gross, but the way a lot of farmers get rid of the waste is by spraying it through part of the water squares, and that impacts the neighboring residents. So traditionally, when you go back in history, some of the locations where individuals of color, when there was segregation, the zoning. City planners like myself were instructed to create zoning just for people of color. That zoning then went away, but the property that was purchased and designed in that place is still in place now. So trying to undo this. You don't have a history of people living in a particular location where they're exposed to toxic elements, where they're exposed to pollution. Next slide. Okay, so theme 3 is shoreline management. Recently, we had worked on that. That was something that was done prior to me getting here, and that's something that Laura has probably talked to you about previously. However, it also has to be addressed in this particular element, and so it's a lot of the same themes that you'll see in shoreline management. Preserving and restoring habitat connections, voluntary planting of native trees, soil stability via retention and existing vegetation. And then culturally modified trees is something that's new. We do partner and consult with the Snoqualmie tribes and the other tribes. We did reach out to them. We also heard back from Puget Sound Energy, which I forgot to put in the slides, so I want to mention it now. And then we also heard back from the Department of Fish and Wildlife with some of their recommendations. So that's where some of this is reflected. And again, these are only some key points I wanted to point out to you. There's many other policies that are not brought up in the slide, but if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Next slide. We can go back to any of the slides too. And that's it. I'm hoping
Councilmember Nahon?
So you had mentioned that we aren't gonna read this overview.
it is an overview. It's literally ready for all of the others that are coming in. You will see this again.
So, I mean, when I was reading through it, I felt very excited about a lot of the things that were in it. I may or may not have comments or ideas, but I don't know, is there, the next time it comes, is it going to be in its full draft form, kind of too late to have input? Are we about to be shipped off, or like?
What's the timeline? How
Yeah,
can we
'cause I'd like to see, you know, as things develop even more, I may not have any comments, because by the time it's, you know, further along, there'll be more.
Yeah.
I don't know, I just don't know the appropriate
Oh, absolutely. Comments are welcome now. Oh, they're welcome now with anything that you see. We're taking comments now. We're still, we haven't even issued SEPA, for example. So once SEPA determination is made, then there'll be a time period for comments then too. We will not be offering it. We will not be coming back here offering it for adoption until December.
Okay.
Prior to December, there's going to be a public hearing with planning commission, and then there'll be a public hearing with you as well. And so, and even before that, comments will be accepted for the next 12 months. So let's say, for example, that you go home tonight, a few days go by, you're making dinner or folding laundry, and you think, oh my gosh, I just realized that I should have made this comment. That happens. If that happens, then you can provide the comments in the appropriate manner and on an expert city council meetings. Actually, there's a way to do that. Cynthia knows that. But yes, always open for comments. Always open for comments whenever that comes up. And so just so you know, the way that the procedure will work is once I receive the comments from Laura, or comments, I'm imagining, yeah, and they get passed on to me, then we have weekly meetings with our lead consultant, and she's managing all of the other consultants. And depending on the topic, we bring up any new comments that have come in and we discuss them. So, but once it's more formalized, because this is just basically dipping the toes in, it's going to be like what you saw with the housing action plan, for example, where things will be becoming more formalized, and we had a spreadsheet where you could take a look at each policy and you can make comments regarding that policy. We're going to get to that point again. And so I'll be tracking, we'll have a comment sheet, it'll probably be an Excel spreadsheet. And each chapter is going to have its own tab, and you'll be able to track comments, and then you'll see staff responses, so that you'll be able to be a part of the evolution of the final policy.
Councilmember Schaefer?
First of all, let's look straight. My comment actually isn't so much on the comprehensive plan, it's more directed towards council itself and our need for a more stringent tree policy here in Duval. With the goal of preserving our tree canopy. Right now, what we have, I personally believe is insufficient. I've seen developments go in that are basically clear cut, following our tree policy, by the way, but clear cut the area of substantial trees. These were not small trees. These were large, mature evergreen trees, leaving a small little corner over in one part, so we probably couldn't have built the house anyway, that allowed them to abide by our current tree policy. I don't know how many of you a couple of years ago noticed the development that went in on the southeast corner of 145th and 3rd, but it broke my heart to see the trees that were cut down there. These were large, mature trees, probably 50 to 100 feet tall, something like that. And I think that was, for me at least, that was a call to action to institute something here at Duval that would be more protective of those types of trees. And I know we define substantial trees in our current tree policy, but then we give the developers all sorts of ways to get out of that and allow them to cut it down. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that comment.
Yeah, so we can check. Okay, good, Councilmember.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people have good effort. We'll try really hard to come up with something that would work. And at one point, I think our city had invested some money to hire people to come back and tell us, and that was really important to people who were on that tree policy, that we would review it after, I think, a year, or I don't know, do you remember? It was pretty specific, and we wanted them to come back. We need to see how. And we've been busy, so I'm not blaming anyone, but it hasn't happened. It needs to be done. I agree. I think that working today well. So my question is also kind of in how do you get these goals and ideas to turn into actual policy and action? Because I look at this and a lot of the great ideas were in the last comp plan, and I felt excited about that one too. And then the things kind of turn into policy, that what happens. And so one idea that I felt really strongly about for a long time is that I'd love to have something like a Green City Initiative that Forterra wants to sound. There's lots of cities that do it, Green Seattle, Green Snoqualmie, and it's kind of a partnership within that program. If you go on Forterra's website, there's volunteer things, there's best practices for staff. So you're kind of putting all of the ideas that you see in this comp plan kind of into action. And there's an umbrella of being a green city. And there's stewardship opportunities for members of the community that just really care about the community could go to a class about being a steward and, adopt one of our local open spaces and, have volunteer events where you're removing invasive species. And I see that that's something that I keep hearing again and again. The community cares about all of these things. And so we put it in these documents, and then how do we make and see, what the community cares about, turn it into action and results, really results. We want to see results. So anyway, I don't know where that is, because I know this is more of a training document. At what level could we say something like, let's look into a program within the city such as the Green City program? Where do we put that in to really be specific? We want to see an action. It will have results. These are all wonderful ideas, right? But it all takes that next step to happen.
That's right.
I mean, ultimately, your budget is your that is your action plan. Whatever you budget is what ends up being done. And so it's up to council and the mayor, because, you know, the budget is for operational improvement as well, to ensure that you're budgeting for things that you want to see, because while it is, you know, a fiscal document, it's also your strategic document. Tell the community, tell the staff the things that are important to you and the things that you want done. I've had a conversation with a subcommittee of council last week where I said, it's in the budget and you wanted it done. My job is to ensure that what's in the budget, put in line item project. And that's your job.
I think you can
I
get
put
the
a follow-up,
and then-
yeah. So I mean, that's an idea I've had for a long time, and I know we had opportunities to comment on the budget, and I thought there were a lot of ideas that kind of support kind of that green. And is that something that specific you would want? It's not something we'd be buying in a budget, but is that something you would have wanted to say when we gave our budget priorities? I just don't know where to get into that level of specificity.
I can answer that because I actually did do the Green City program.
Oh, so you know about it?
Yeah, I know about it. It's very expensive.
Mm.
So the way that it works with Forterra is that somebody has to pay. The reason that they ended up having me do it, it was like my first experience in policy actually, with the city of Burien, was because there were some issues with, the third or fourth runway at the airport. And so there was significant environmental impacts, in residential areas. And so one of the concessions that were made between those cities was, that, the Port of Seattle would pay for Terra to come in and do a tri-city green city program. Because a lot of trees were taken down, for safety reasons for airplanes. So Terra gets paid. And then Terra will come in and work with a designated staff member or a number of staff members and work on the Green City program. And it's just like a plan, it's a policy document as well. But the other thing that they do is it's more action oriented, because then they help you seed at the beginning of a stewardship program. And they take survey in the entire city, they look at the urban canopy, they look at the condition of the parks. So it is possible, but the money has to be there to pay for Terra to do it.
So it would be a budget request then to participate in something like that?
Yeah, so what I would say is, things seem free, but are rarely free. So if, for instance, council has an objective to do something like this, our response would likely be, that we can do this particular program. So would we get a consultant, would we have a temporary staff and help us with this? So while it may seem free, those things that go into programming in the city or projects are not free. They require at least a staffing component, and sometimes we have the staff to do it. There are a lot of things we have the staff to do. But the process will be as part of the preliminary budget. You know, you'll get the mayor's preliminary budget, and if there are things that you want to see in that preliminary budget, you would make a budget request or budget amendment to put something into the budget. And that's ultimately getting rolled up into what our project plan is. Because that's what projects. This is a slightly hard course because we're doing the comp plan into December. We've been getting budget deliberations in September, so certainly council can consider some placeholders for the year of the biennium. So, yeah, what I would say is when you see the preliminary budget, which we're hoping at the end of September to deliver, council will just be thinking about what are your goals. Staff are certainly, we have your list of goals. As we put together the preliminary budget, we're going to reference it to make sure that we're cross-referencing the proposals we make with council goals and noting them, where we think one of our proposals will meet the council goal. So that's kind of where I'm anticipating you all being active in the things you want to see.
Councilmember Bithell.
Thank you. My only that I would add is I think keeping the tree is important. And what I've noticed is, tree fall on a tree. And if you go up 150th right now, you're gonna see that all the maples are dying. I think at a minimum, we need to have a requirement for, developers to put in at least 3 different trees, whether they're native trees or whatever, so that they don't all start dying at the same time, or they don't have feeders that keep them. There's some barrier to keep things green and you don't have to rip it all out at the same time.
Yeah, but thank you for that recommendation. That's interesting because that was one of the recommendations in the previous city I worked for. That you have to have different kinds of trees. That was for that location, but there is a common phrase called right tree, right place. When you plant the right tree in the right place, you don't have to take it down. I have a question. And this is just for presentation purposes, because I want to be able to give you information that's useful and not leave you with more questions. And I'm wondering, because you're entering the budget, which is not something I'm, but I want to be able to have the information that we're presenting to you also be relevant. And since this is, explaining the way the policy document works, it's kind of it always is. So even after that, we're basing on population numbers that were right a couple of years ago, so we're always behind. But this policy document also works in that it's the same thing for the parks plan, which you'll see come through too, is that we're writing something that then we can go back and cite when we apply for grant money to do the thing. And so it's basically whatever we're writing, and I should have put that in the presentation. I apologize for that. I wasn't thinking, is that it has to be consistent with state law. It has to be consistent with county policies. It has to reflect the wishes of the people are appointed and elected bodies. But it also should, this have to, but it should be written in a way that when staff apply for this, that they can cite that section of the comprehensive plan and say, we need this money to do this thing. Our comprehensive plan on page blah, blah, blah says that this is what, 1, the law requires us to do, and 2, this is what the people want. So then there's a higher chance of getting that grant. So that's eventually where the money comes in. You'll have to cross your fingers. But if there's nothing in the comprehensive plan that says we have to do this, also we need money to do this, then you can't get the grant because there's no policy document that says it.
Other comments, questions? I would just add really, we're getting close to our time, based off of, what you brought up, Councilmember Schaefer, about the trees, and I think it was 7-ish years ago that, I don't know if it's steering committee or it was like the tree insensitive areas committee, and that was a big lift and a big change, and it drastically changed, but it's not enough, and it's also, because I mean, there's so many things we do where we are constantly a little behind and you're trying to always do the next things, you only update these things so often. I do remember that it was supposed to be, we were supposed to check in on it, and yeah, it's always a staff or a budget kind of thing. I know they did solicit feedback and didn't get a lot from the development community, but what's interesting then is also individuals in the city. I've heard a little more feedback from individual homeowners who have had a really hard time taking a tree down or what they've had to do, but then not feeling the development community has it quite as rough, but maybe it's also because they just know how to navigate those things already. But there are some lots, like there's one really close to me that, was drastically changed after that, and it's because there's a wetland. So it's interesting to really, if we were to look at how that changed and what still needs to be addressed, because I know clear cutting is really hard to see, and I know there is exceptional tree policies, but there's still exceptional trees that get missed, not by our definitions, but in our eyes, and in your heart, you see a huge tree go down. But it's always tough to balance the allowing land use and it being usable. And I agree that there's always a lot to keep working on in that way. And I think to the wildlife corridors was a huge step up and improvement of identifying those. But anyways, I agree that we need to keep looking at that and get more feedback. Councilmember
I
Supple.
think a lot of these developments were approved like in 2008, 2009, long before the tree policy went in effect, and then, you know, the recession came in and they kind of dormant. And then after that ended, they started building up, but they were developing based on the old
Yeah.
laws, not the tree policy.
Very vested.
Yeah, they were invested in the previous one, so.
You know, I lost focus for a minute. The question was, would it be helpful, you know how I showed the pie chart with the different elements? And there's things that come up, it's like, how do we make this happen? Would it be helpful to show the elements as they can into an estimate of money that would cost to make the thing happen? So, you know, environment, sustainability element, we talk about trees in there, for example. To bring this policy into fruition, you would need more or less these types of grants or around this amount of money. Would that help to see the elements that way?
And also how many budgets things, because sometimes things span a long time where, you know, this might take, you know, 5 years, but go ahead.
Yeah, and I would encourage you also to share that with Laura, Director Thomas, because each department director right now is developing their budget requests for the biennial budget. Those are largely operational costs. You know, training, supplies, what it takes to staff departments. But on the bigger things, it would be helpful to actually have some price tags associated potentially. But again, to the degree, you know, because these are still unadopted policies and unadopted document, that hasn't passed public hearing.
Yeah, so maybe a dollar sign, you know, like when you order food or DoorDash, it has $1 sign and $5. It's like, oh, you wanna do this, this is a $5 sign. Okay, yeah.
And engage the dollar signs and the tone, right? Like some are longer investments and some, you know, I don't know.
And the action plan,
Mhm.
it's like, I'm not free, like,
Yeah.
I guess I could do the tree thing, but.
Okay, so thank you for all of that, that was great, and then just a reminder to check out all the written reports, which is quite a few this time. You can always look at the council calendar, I encourage you to look at that, make sure we're not missing anything on there. You know, at the end of the year looks sparse, trust me, that will fill in quickly, because budget stuff is coming. But yeah, anyways, so with that, there's no objections, we'll go ahead and adjourn at 6:57. Anything? Alright, I'm gonna call for the city council meeting at 7:02 p.m. Could everyone please stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Mayor Overlander. Mayor Pro Tem McHenry,
Here,
Mr. Schaefer,
Here.
Mr. Mercer,
Here,
Mr. Supple,
Here,
Ms. Naplin.
Here.
Ms. Cookville.
right, we have a quorum and we have no absences tonight. Anything for additions and corrections to the agenda? Great, I don't see any. Is there a motion to approve the council agenda tonight?
so move.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the council agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes and the agenda is adopted. And then we have 3 proclamations tonight. I get to read them. Are they in order as well?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so first proclamation is for Independence Day. The people of the city of Duval hold dear the ideals of freedom, equality, and justice, striving to build a society that respects the dignity and rights of every individual. And this day marks the anniversary of our collective determination to break free from tyranny and establish a nation where democracy thrives. The voice of the people is heard, and the diverse contributions of all communities enrich our history, and we honor the sacrifices of those who fought for liberty and justice, recognizing that the struggle for true equality continues. And we acknowledge the ongoing challenges faced by marginalized communities and commit to addressing systemic injustices through inclusive policies and practices that uplift everyone. And in celebrating Independence Day, we reaffirm our dedication to building a more perfect union where environmental sustainability, economic equity, and social justice are at the forefront of our national priorities. And this day serves as a reminder of our responsibility to future generations to create a world where freedom and opportunity are accessible to all, regardless of race, gender, national origin, sexual orientation, religion, or socioeconomic status. Now, therefore, I, Amy Overlander, Mayor of the City of Duval, hereby proclaim July 4th, 2024 as Independence Day. In the city of Duval, I encourage all citizens to engage in activities that promote unity, reflect on our shared history, and work towards a more inclusive and just society. Let this proclamation inspire us to celebrate our progress, recognize our challenges, and commit to the ongoing work of ensuring freedom and justice for all. Amy Overlander. Oh, got it. Okay, thank you for that. I know some of the font I was struggling with. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Okay, and our next one is for the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act, enacted on July 2nd, 1964 by President Lyndon Johnson, marked a pivotal moment in our nation's history, laying the groundwork for a society committed to equality, justice, and the protection of civil liberties for all. And whereas this transformative legislation outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, and catalyzed the dismantling of systemic inequalities that have long hindered marginalized communities. And whereas the passage of the Civil Rights Act was achieved through the relentless activism and bravery of civil rights leaders, grassroots organizers, and countless individuals who risked their lives to fight for justice, equality. And whereas the Civil Rights Act has been a foundation for further advancements in civil rights, inspiring ongoing efforts to address discrimination and inequality in all its forms, including those based on gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, and socioeconomic status. And whereas we recognize that while significant progress has been made, much work remains to be done to achieve true equity and justice, particularly in areas such as criminal justice reform, voting rights, economic equality, and environmental justice. And whereas it is essential to honor this milestone by reflecting on our history, celebrating our diversity, and recommitting ourselves to the continuous struggle for a society where every individual's rights are protected and valued. And now therefore, I, Amy Oaklander, Mayor of the City of Duval, hereby proclaim July 2nd, 2024 as Civil Rights Act Day. In the City of Duval, I call upon all citizens to engage in actions that promote understanding, celebrate our diverse heritage, and work towards a more just and equitable society. May this day serve as a catalyst for reflection, celebration, and a renewed commitment to advancing civil rights, ensuring equality, and promoting justice for all. Amy Oaklander, Mayor. And our last proclamation is for National Parks Month. Our national parks are living, breathing testaments to the beauty, history, and natural heritage of our nation and our beautiful state. They offer us majestic landscapes, diverse ecosystems, and cultural treasures that inspire awe and reverence. Whereas national parks provide opportunities for recreation, education, and adventure, allowing individuals and families to connect with nature, engage in healthy outdoor activities, and create lasting memories. And whereas the preservation and protection of our national parks are essential for the enjoyment of present and future generations, ensuring that these natural wonders remain unspoiled and accessible to all. And whereas the dedicated efforts of park rangers, conservationists, volunteers, and community advocates are vital to maintaining the integrity and vitality of our national parks, exemplifying the spirit of stewardship and public service. And whereas National Parks Month is a time to celebrate the splendor of our national parks, recognize their importance to our cultural and natural heritage, reaffirm our commitment to their conservation and protection. And whereas during this month, we call upon all citizens of Duval to not just visit and explore our national parks, but to actively participate in events and activities that promote environmental education and conservation. Your support is crucial in ensuring the sustainability of these cherished spaces, and your involvement can make a significant difference in preserving our natural heritage. Now therefore, I, Amy Oaklander, Mayor of the City of Duval, hereby proclaim July 2024 as National Parks Month. In the City of Duval, National Parks Month is not just a national celebration, but a local call to action. This summer, let's make the most of our beautiful state by visiting one of the many national parks we are privileged to have. Parks such as Edie's Landing, Fort Vancouver, Lake Roosevelt, Minidoka, Mount Rainier, Nez Perce, Olympic, and many others, not forgetting our state and city parks. I urge all citizens to seize this opportunity to appreciate the beauty and significance of our national, state, county, and local parks, engage in efforts to preserve these natural treasures, and celebrate the legacy of our public lands. Let's be inspired and inspire others to cherish, protect, and celebrate our national parks, ensuring their beauty and benefits endure for generations to come. Amy Oaklander, Mayor. All right, that's it. So next up, we have comments from the audience. During the designated public commentary period within city council meetings, individuals are allotted a 3-minute speaking duration, while representatives of organizations may address the council for up to 5 minutes. Before presenting, kindly disclose your full name and city of residence. It is strongly advised by the city to submit verbal comments in written form to expedite subsequent correspondence. Written comments must be received by the city clerk's office by noon on a meeting day. And then just double checking, I read the entire blurb here, or was that the important part? Do you remember? Okay. I know it keeps going a little bit more just about how you would get your comments in before the meeting. But I will jump ahead because I think it's important to say that the council does not accept handouts or printed material during public commentary sessions. Information intended for the mayor or city council should be directed to the city clerk, who will disseminate it following the submitter's instructions. Upon receipt, city clerk will receive written public comments and subsequently furnish them to the city council or relevant board or commission. However, it's important to note that written comments will not be orally presented during the council or applicable board or commission meetings. Any written comments received after the noon deadline for written comments will be shared with council at the next council meeting as a part of the city clerk's report. So with that, did we have anyone sign up to speak?
Yes, Director Flynn, we have Michaela G.
If you want to approach the podium, and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, Duval City Council. My name is Michaela G. I'm a resident in Woodinville, and I was a resident for Duval for over 18 years. I serve on our board of directors for County Realtors, and I'm a broker with Compass Real Estate. So thank you for the opportunity tonight to comment on the sign code. I'm here to ask you to reconsider your approach to how residential open house aid boards would be treated. As proposed, they would require a plan and a permit as a temporary sign. So I brought one of these to show you as a reminder what an open house aid board is. These signs are crucial to our sales process. I usually will typically post about 3 to 4 on an open house day. Those are on Saturday or Sunday, about 1 to 4. Duval addresses, as we know, can be very hard to find, and phone apps and cellular data don't always get you to the home. So these signs are used to guide people to the open house. They're placed in the right of way, but they're not obstructing traffic or any pedestrian movement. A signage placement plan and permit process would constrain the flexibility I have to my seller's home to sell it quickly and freely. The decision to hold an open house may be made late on a Friday afternoon or even on the same day decision due to the owner's schedule, market conditions, or even weather. So events, road construction, etc., will influence sign placements. Therefore, themes are really tough to know beforehand. There's very little risk of these signs being left out unless they are expensive. A whole order of signs is about $500, and I always make sure to collect them right after my open house is ended. I think perhaps most importantly, real estate signs play a really important role in fair housing. Signs do not discriminate. They enable anyone to drive through a community and see what's for sale. Open house signs invite anyone to tour the home, regardless of registration, and you don't have any obstacles like sign up or representation. It's barrier free and it allows non-discriminatory access to housing, a principle that's reflected in federal, state, and local laws. It's our non-discriminatory access to housing that gives cities the ability to regulate residential real estate signage different from commercial signage. So I thank you for allowing me to speak and helping me find a solution.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to speak?
Brandon Banneker.
Put up the podium.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Randy Banneker, and I am here on behalf of the Seattle King County Realtors. I'm a resident of Seattle, if that matters. I want to thank you for your work on the sign code. Sign codes are very difficult topics, lengthy and complicated. The discussion you had at your committee, the whole meeting, I think was fantastic and makes me feel like things are headed in the right direction. The concept that you can start to think about industry sector signage, commercial temporary signage is absolutely the way to go. And I want to add to the record why I think you have the latitude to do that in the context of the Supreme Court decision. Your planner mentioned that the Supreme Court decision pertains to non-commercial signage, and that is absolutely right. Many jurisdictions are lobbying the two together and creating a big challenge in terms of reinventing their sign codes and making some complications where complications don't need to happen. So I encourage you to continue to pursue that distinction. We've worked with many cities, and I'm going to provide your staff with just a simple matrix that shows how cities have aligned with the Supreme Court decision, stayed on the high side of legality, but also enabled the residential real estate signage to continue its traditional format, and that is typically one for sale sign on the property for sale, or perhaps one for street frontage, and then 3 or 4 open house A-board signs. They're posted in the right of way, and they're up only during open house. And as Ms. G mentioned, there are the fair housing component, the non-discriminatory component, creates, we think, for a city a compelling interest that allows you to regulate residential real estate signs separately from another commercial temporary sign. In addition, this is in the Supreme Court decisions, and I'll provide you with the language, that a home is a major life decision. It changes people's lives. It's where your children go to school. It's how you raise your family. And it also, real estate signs have an impact on city revenue. The speedy sale generates real estate excise tax, and that goes to your coffers. And again, that adds to a compelling interest. Those comments are principally for the record, because I think it just puts you on the high road and gives you latitude in your sign code deliberation. I wanted to make a few suggestions that I think would just ease your debate. One is, there was a discussion of the stake arrow signs or signs in the right of way that are driven into the ground. I would suggest that you prohibit. Because those are where signs tend to proliferate. And they're very hard to enforce. And we would just, all we want is 3 or 4 off premises public house signs. We don't want to see a proliferation in the land. And we think this gives a nice bright line for you to be clear about what is allowed and what isn't allowed. We have a self-enforcement policy. If our brokers are violating the city sign code, our organization calls the designated broker or their license hangs and says, this individual is putting at risk our ability to use our signs, and they plant them. And we've had several examples of that. Lastly, I would ask you to keep working on that permit concept. That is a real challenge, just because of the nature of the entities involved. There are more than there are thousands of entities throughout the region, and they may be doing business in Duval. And I think you want them to do business in Duval because it just, again, adds to that marketplace. And so we think there are ways to control what's going on with the signage, not burden your staff.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Not burden your staff, not burden our industry. We want to work with you and make this very much good. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, thank you.
Clancy Ronnie.
Thank you, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to talk in front of you, and I have to tell you, gratitude for your positions, and I'm a generational Duval person. My great grandmother was part of the Duval City Council in the early 1930s, so I honor and respect what you guys do for us. I'm here today, Duval Historical Society, as well as Duval Civic Club. I'm here because it is that time of year where we're talking fireworks, and I want to make sure a few points are known so we can keep doing the wonderful thing for our community for the next couple of years. I want to reiterate the point of the proclamation that was just read about Independence Day. In the city of Duval, I encourage all citizens to engage in activities that promote unity, reflect on our shared history, and work towards a more inclusive and just society. Let the proclamation inspire us to celebrate our progress, recognize our challenges, and commit to the ongoing work of ensuring freedom and justice for all. Banning fireworks would negate the Independence Day proclamation that was just read. Now that we're selling fireworks, we're meeting neighbors every day that are promoting individuals coming together as a neighborhood to celebrate our independence and this holiday. Our shared history is not only Independence Day, but Duval Rotary in 2011 started selling fireworks for this community, and Duval Civic Club took it over in 2019 in order to give forward 100% of the profits raised back into our community. Last year, the Civic Club netted over $11,000, and all funds were redistributed into this town. In celebrating the progress, we acknowledge our tight-knit housing logistics, as well as weather implications to fireworks. We believe adults accept the challenges of fireworks and the safety of their pets and little children in our community. Of the last 4 or 5 years, actual emergency responses needed underscore the call needed to answer complaints. Our community is exercising their commitment to freedom and justice by allowing Duval Civic Club fireworks stand to be #1 since we opened last Friday. That's #1 out of 69 TNT stands in Western. So let the money speak for itself on what some of the Duval citizens may think. In weather that is not conducive to fireworks, there are options that are available to the town of Duval. Rather than banning fireworks or canceling celebrations, the Civic Club can modify the product it provides to the Duval citizens. We don't have to provide aerial, we can do ground fountains. So when considering if there is a ban or restrictions due to weather, which we honor, we want to make sure that we are available to make funds for the town of Duval. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anyone else signed up?
No.
If anyone else in the audience would like to sign up, if you wanted to speak, go ahead and approach the podium. Seeing anyone new, so. All right, so we'll go ahead and close our comments. Next up, the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve consent agenda tonight? Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Okay, motion passes and the consent agenda is adopted. Next up, scheduled items. The mayor is running late, so we will skip over her report and go to the city administrator's report.
Good evening, members of the community, staff. Very short city administrator's report. Tonight we have Public Works is passing tonight because our Public Works director is on a much needed vacation. So next slide, we do have a single slide from Community Development for the same reason our Community Development director is on a much needed vacation. Which she did offer a couple updates prior to going on vacation. So a reminder, an email went out, but on July 24th, we're having a joint planning commission and council meeting workshop. Please, element of our comprehensive plan, so that's scheduled for 7/24. Similarly, on August 13th, there will be a joint planning commission and council workshop on the draft structural and open space and housing element. So start seeing this theme, every month we'll have at least 2 to 4 elements coming before council and planning commission up until their adoption in December. Planning commission has a vacancy. So if you know anyone who's interested in serving on a planning commission, please share the news that we have a vacancy and that we are eager for applicants for the planning commission. We received a pre-application meeting for a mixed-use development and received a preliminary plat application. I would love to tell you more, but I don't know more than that, other than we received that. The planning commission has completed design review for the brewery project, which is really exciting. That project is moving along at pretty brisk clip. When completed, it'll be a really exciting development. So very excited about that. Director Thomas, the community development team, as well as all the other departments are preparing for budget season. We began our internal department budget meetings this week and they'll continue for the next 2 weeks. And the new permit center in the Public Works building is now full. Slide. So just a couple quick updates from City Hall. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is determining council's preference for meeting or appointment of the city council position. So when we had a potential for 3 applications, it was possible to appoint a new council member at the next council meeting on July 16th. However, we have 5 applications. So on the July 16th meeting, there'll be an executive session to select the top 3 candidates as according to council procedures. So then the question is, if you want to hold a special session on July 23rd for the purposes of appointing that position, or if you want to have a meeting on August 6th with a reminder, that's your regularly scheduled meeting. Spoke to the chief, and national night out activities are going to be in or around 6 o'clock. So if we were to have a council meeting on August 6th, we would need to move the time of the council meeting on August 6th for those members of council who want to participate. So that's kind of an open question to you all, how you want to proceed with either holding that special session or moving the August 6th meeting, or you can just hold it August 6th meeting at 7.
Council members, any thoughts on that? I guess for me, I thought, you know, are most people planning on attending National Night Out? I know I will. You know, I just want, I don't know if there's a better date, you know, if we're all already gonna go to National Night Out and we can meet up before, do it. But otherwise, I mean, the 23rd works for me, both work schedule wise, so. Did you had your hand up, good, Councilmember?
Yeah, and I have participated in this one last few years. It's a great way to actually spot people. You know, get that opportunity a lot. And I would personally prefer a special meeting on July 23rd, sorry.
Councilmember
This is
Sokol?
the 23rd, I don't have my calendar, is that a regular meeting? Or
It is not, so you will have a meeting tonight and July 16th is your regular meeting. But July 16th, you'll have to go into executive session to choose your top 3 candidates, so you need an additional meeting to appoint.
Also, then the top 3 come in, we
Interview.
we interview them in the.
Councilmember Nevlin?
So if we have a meeting on the 23rd, it would just probably be one topic, 7 PM or maybe, I mean, it'd just be one. We wouldn't have
No.
that would be the only.
Yeah, so we can schedule it whenever you want. We would need to notice it pretty quickly because of notice requirements. For regular meetings, different than special meetings. So we would notice it as a regular meeting of council because it can't be a workshop if you're voting. And it would be a single agenda. And then up to you all when you want to have files. You know, a regular time.
For which one? The
I'm the 23rd.
23rd. And Councilmember, I think I'm gonna Councilmember first.
I'm fine with the 23rd.
Yeah, and I'm flexible, you know, as well. I'm a little behind on my interviews, being sick this past week, but that's really driven by the 16th. So from that point, either the 23rd or the 6th. I think it sounds like there's a consensus for the 23rd to leave August 6th open, and I'm fine with that.
Councilmember Sokol, are you available? Okay, sounds like 20.
Second point is there eroded so that you will see it reflected on your agenda. Agenda Bill 2446 is an agenda bill that is in the written report, identifying critical IT infrastructure investments that we need to make. Please let me know by email if you have any questions on that. I just wanted to highlight that it's there for your reading. There are 2 critical IT infrastructure projects that need to occur fairly immediately. One of which is the city has to multi-factor identification to comply with CJIS, which is criminal justice information system. Probably chief and and then the second is investments in our server capacity. So please read that. Let me know if you have any questions. The canoe journey for the Snoqualmie Tribe is occurring this month. They will land at McCormick Park on July 24th. The city will be hosting a greeting event for the Snoqualmie Tribe. Approximately 3 o'clock. We will be providing a meal to the Snoqualmie Tribe members who land. And we will advertise the city event to welcome the tribe members to Duval. So that will be forthcoming. You'll see some information on that on social media and our website. Please let us know if you would like to participate by either bringing food to contribute to the tribe or some other way. But we are in the community if they would like to bring the It's a youth journey. So it's the younger members of the tribe who are doing it this year. And yeah, we want to make sure that the city will see some kids feel welcome into our city when they learn. We have this week interviews, as well as next week, for the permit specialist, the associate planner, and the temporary finance and budget analyst. So we will be concluding first round interviews for all 3 of those positions by the end of next week. And then staff have fully moved into the public works building, so that's our planning and building staff, as well as permit center. Once we have the final punch list and everything is kind of clean and ready and the boxes are unpacked, we'll have a ribbon cutting and invite council to do a tour of that building. It's beautiful. City staff that are still in City Hall are doing musical offices right now. You will now find me in the first office to the right next to the front desk. So I've moved upstairs. Next slide. Just a couple updates on community events. So music crawl series starts this weekend. Saturday noon to 8. It starts at Amarillo and it ends at Duval Tavern. So looking forward to, I will be here just supporting Morgan Henley in this new series and supporting the event. We had a Port of Seattle grant to do 2 events in the fall. We've kind of iterated on them. One is going to be a December event focusing on Polar Express theme and bringing some train events into the city. The September event, thank you to the Duval Historical Society for helping us plan an event at Doherty Farm. So we're gonna do a September movie night out on the farm. We're planning it in coordination with the National Hispanic Heritage Month. We're gonna try to show Coco and then decorate it with National Hispanic Heritage Month themed environment. And we are going to partner with some nonprofits to see if kids or others want some popcorn, but they sell and really do a fun family event out on Doherty Farm. If it works, we're hoping to expand it next year into maybe a Halloween event, Halloween movie theme. So we're really looking forward to it. It's kind of proof of concept at this point to see if we can have movie night out there. Our Public Works Department is extremely excited about it because they're envisioning these paths that are moving that like will open up into a field with a big movie theater. So we'll see how it goes. But we're really excited. We're really excited. And then Summer Stage starts on the 10th. As a reminder, on July 17th, there'll be a council chat at the city tent at Summer Stage. If anybody would like to join me or participate on it, we'll be there at that event, Summer Stage. And with that, any questions? Councilmember Schaefer.
John, could you go back 3 slides? What, yeah. One more, sorry. No, sorry, back.
Oh.
Back again. Oh, yeah.
That's the first one.
Yeah, this is the one, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see, so a question on the planning commission. I thought there was a recent opening in the planning commission that was filled, or at least the deadline expired. Is there a new position open?
So several months ago, we had an opening on planning commission and we filled that. And then since we've had another planning commissioner leave the city,
Okay,
move, so now we have a new opening.
okay, so yeah, I asked because I know someone that's interested. And a comment on the brewery project. I sat in on the planning commission meeting that where that was discussed, and that's a really exciting project. It's the building, the parking lot is actually a very small part of the total land there. Most of it is going to be a farm, and that's really cool, and it's going to fit in so well with Duval. So I'm real excited.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, next up, we have council board committee report. Any council member staff reports for tonight? I'll go ahead and go. I'm trying to remember. It's been a little while since we met last. So I attended one day of AWC conference. And attended a lot of really great sessions. And then I also just recently, let's see, what was it, last week? Attended the SCA networking dinner event, and that was really interesting as well, because they had someone from PSC and they were just talking about the future of that utility and talking about alternative power, and like as density grows and there's more pull on the power grid, you know, they might have to look at different options. You know, there are some areas that kind of do those rolling power outages, or they minimize power usage during certain times, or they utilize batteries in homes, or people not realizing that their Teslas are potentially a power source, and all kinds of, they're trying to think outside the box and really look at how to minimize pull on the power grid. So that was interesting to sit on, and it'll be cool to see what they do in the future and where that goes. And then apologies, I sent you all an email earlier today. I forgot to send out council chats. I picked them, and then the intern was working on an amazing flyer that I was still hanging up around town really quick. But the first council chat's tomorrow at 10 a.m. I feel like it was at CC's. It's in the calendar invite I sent all of you. So we can't have quorum at that council chat because there wouldn't be time to notice it. It's important, especially for, I think for the summer stage one, especially because I can see that being a popular one. If you could RSVP on that invite for July 17th for the council chat at summer stage, if you're gonna be there, just that way, if we are gonna have a quorum, then we could notice it. So that's okay as long as we give notice. So just look at those calendar invites I sent and RSVP yes or no, so that we have a heads up if. And I think that way, what would be the noticing requirement on that? Could you remind me? 3 days. 3 days. Okay, so try to do it soon. So we can make sure that's done. And that's all I had. Oh, and just to say, I hope you can go to the canoe landing. I did that last year. I brought them a bunch of chocolate chip cookies because I had read about how you should bring a gift. I'm so excited the city has the opportunity to provide dinner to the tribe members. It's very neat experience, and if they are doing it like last year, they had a tracker, so someone on the canoe has their phone plugged into the app, and you can actually real time see where they are on the river. So we had an idea of how long we'll be waiting on the riverbank, and if you're there when they get there, you can also help haul in their canoe because they're pretty tired when they get there, and they can use a little help hauling it in on shore. So if you can make it to it, definitely try. So with that, are there other council members? Council member Kufel?
Hi, yeah, I went to the third annual housing issues briefing. Luncheon. And they were talking about middle housing for King County and how there's such a dearth of it. Primarily, they were talking about ADUs and attached ADUs. And how currently they're set up as, divide them up as a condominium, which is really kind of unwieldy. For the people living in the sell it or whatever, and they were proposing, realtors were proposing that cities instead, like we do, you know, lots of to make it easier to have those ADUs and attached ADUs, so they bring more people in two family members or, you know, whatever. And they, you know, they were really stressing that housing is about people. And room for people to have places to live that may not be a standalone unit. You know, the housing is just so astronomical that we have to find ways to get people.
Any other reports?
Good.
Something really exciting as part of our little economic development committee, and it ended up on the consent agenda for rehabilitating the little stage at Depot Park, which I think will be really a wonderful amenity and opportunity for local artists, theater groups to have just a place to put on their little shows and make it more convenient. And kind of as I was excited about that, I mentioned it to someone and just kind of brainstorming that it might be great to, you know, make sure as we design it, if there are choices to be made, that maybe we could reach out to a couple of user groups, just say, hey, we're redoing it. Is there anything that hasn't worked well with what was there before that we could make things more convenient? And I got a couple of names and I can send them on to the administrator of NAB. And I did have a question because it's still describing it as a pergola, and I wasn't sure, were we going to make that a roof so you wouldn't have to then put tarps over the top of it?
Yes,
Okay.
so the plan is to have a roof structure over it at that price point, so it won't just be an open air pergola. It'll be a roof structure, because the goal really is to create to a degree we can like a little mini concert point there at that landing, so it'll be a fully roofed.
Great, so anyway, I just want to thank everyone here that voted on approving the consent agenda. I think that will be just such a great thing for the community to have. And then I also attended 2 ribbon cuttings with the chamber. One was actually 2 ribbon cuttings, and that was at the farmer's market. And Councilmember Henry was also there in attendance. And if you haven't been to the farmer's market this year, it's fantastic. So many little local businesses. It's just really wonderful. The music is great. Quite a few people, you know, and it's really been wonderful. So I attended the ribbon cutting there, and then also the Duval Veterinary Hospital, who did that just massive remodel, and it's beautiful. It fits in the style of our. It's great for everyone in seen it right by it, and yeah, just it's exciting to see local independent pieces. Excited about for Duval, that we don't want to become just a place where chain businesses come, but you know, individual small businesses, women-owned businesses, you know, some of the ones I think too for the ribbon. And then the last thing is, when I was at one of those events, I received a couple different pieces of feedback. One was a person who had mentioned this before about the leading edge and the little islands that are medians in roads that they've noticed that they get hit quite a bit, and could be a hazard, you know, could be paint them brighter. And I thought about it afterwards, but some of them do already have painting in different warnings. I just wanted to make sure I saw that information and the feedback and see if there was anything to be done. And then the other, let's see, on composting, just wanted to know if commercial businesses to compost, so that if they want to separate out compost, and I believe when I looked at our contract that commercial businesses had access to the yard waste compost service, the same as residents was what it looked like, but you know, this local business hit us and wish that they had maybe we do. So I wanted to double check on it. It was interesting when we were even talking about the environmental sustainability plan. It's just then it's talking about how our city also is trying to be cognizant of that and use the resulting compost that comes back. You know, doing another well, taking care of that. So that's all.
Great, thank you. Any other reports? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on to, we have one public hearing tonight. Read the section for the public hearing. I can't remember either of those. You do it. Yeah, I do. I don't know. Okay. So, in adherence to the regulations outlined for public hearings before the Duval City Council, Chapter 9 of the City Council Procedures Manual, any individual seeking to address the council during the designated public comment segment must comply with the following procedures. First, sign in on the provided form specific to the public hearing, and second, thoroughly complete all pertinent sections of the said form. Upon commencement of the hearing, as announced by the chair, typically the mayor, the city clerk will present the chair with the sign-in sheet. Subsequently, the chair will proceed with the agenda for the public hearing. Each speaker will be summoned to the podium in the order listed on the sign-in form, where they must communicate their name and, if relevant, their address, affiliation with any organization or group being represented, and their corresponding role or position within said organization or group. Time limits for speaking engagements are 3 minutes for individuals representing themselves and 5 minutes for those representing a group or organization unless otherwise determined by a majority vote of council present. The city clerk will monitor and enforce these time limits, setting a timer for each speaker. Comments should be pertinent to the subject matter of the public hearing and respectfully addressed to the city council, with personal remarks being deemed inappropriate. Disorderly conduct, including disruptive behaviors such as booing or harassment, will not be tolerated and may result in removal from the premises. Speakers may alternatively submit written statements, which will be added to the official record by the city clerk. Questions posed during the hearing will not be answered immediately, but may be addressed at the chair's discretion following the close of the comment period. Copies of city council and public hearing procedures will be available upon request and distributed to attendees at the outset of each public hearing session conducted by the Duval City Council. So, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing for Agenda Bill 24-38, which is our comprehensive emergency management plan with Luke Eckert, our emergency management coordinator.
Good evening, community council. So we're back with the comprehensive emergency management plan, the CEMP. Next slide, please. So I just want to go over a quick familiarization, or for those of you who have gone over a CEMP before, a recap of what the CEMP is, why it's important. Next slide, please. So the CEMP is a written basic plan with elements addressing all natural and man-made emergencies and disasters that the city of Duval is vulnerable to. The CEMP specifies the purpose, organization, and responsibilities of each city department, our partner agencies, and any external organizations we work with in the mitigation of preparedness, response, and recovery from emergencies and disasters. Next slide, please. So the basic function of the CEMP is to help the city continue to function as a city in the face of a large-scale emergency. The goal is that every department and all of our staff within the city know what their responsibilities are to keep the city functioning and to keep the public safe. And the CEMP meets state legal requirements for us to have an emergency plan. It allows us to accept and manage federal grant funds, and different annexes we'll get into at the end make us eligible for additional grant funding. Next slide, please. So the CEMP starts with a hazard assessment, so we know what we should be preparing for and planning for. And as you can see here, this is in our current CEMP, the risks we are exposed to with probability and how severe they would be if they did happen. And then, so for some examples, everybody here has experienced flood, everybody here has experienced extreme weather if you've lived here more than a year. Maybe 6 months even. Heat risk is one that's starting to come up a little bit more, wildfire as well. We're currently in the process of our new hazard mitigation plan. So as I've said, these may change a little bit based on new information, but generally speaking, they're going to be pretty similar with how we're preparing for it. So additional risks that the city is exposed to: industrial accidents, hazmat, power outages, which is secondary to some other ones, cyber incidents, terrorism, and civil unrest. Next slide, please. So just some examples. These are floodplains and fault lines on this map. This is done with King County as part of the hazard mitigation plan. Next slide. Snowstorm on 203. Just some examples of situations that might exceed our initial capabilities and need some outside resources and coordination, which is where emergency management comes in. Next slide. So the plan is structured, has an outline of the entire city's organization and how we function, not just internally, but in partnership with external organizations, and then specific roles and responsibilities for individual positions within departments. Plans for communications for continuity of city functions, both internally and with the public and our partner organizations. It has designation of authority for emergency declarations and how communications and procedures change during a declaration of emergency, how we manage finance during an emergency declaration, and then emergency support functions were a little bit more specific, whereas the CEMP is this very broad overarching plan. It starts to narrow in a little bit more when we go to emergency support functions, and then past that, we have standard operating procedures or even down to checklists, which is the most detailed thing you can have, right? Next slide, please. So the cooperation for the development of the plan, it coincides with other regional plans. The biggest benefit of that is if other jurisdictions come to help us, or we go to help them, they're gonna be very familiar with the way our systems function, so it's not gonna be relearning the wheel from scratch. The plan has been reviewed by individual departments to make sure that their roles and responsibilities match what their regular functions are and historical events that they've had to deal with. And then it's also been sent to some community organizations that we partner with for emergency and disaster response. Next slide, please. So just to recap, I promised to put this in the slideshow because I didn't have it last time. So these are the 4 stages of emergency management. They're very heavily outlined in the CEMP as you read through it. So at any point in time, we're on the left, right? We're always trying to mitigate risks and just get rid of them entirely. And then no matter what we mitigate, there's going to be some stuff that we just can't get rid of, like the rain that causes the river to flood. That'll always be there. So then we prepare for the inevitable outcome of flooding, as an example. And then when it does flood, we respond to that situation, we stabilize the incident, and then we recover. So we're always on the left too, and then when something happens, we go into the right, and then the circle continues forever. Hopefully we stay on the left as much as possible, but things happen. Next slide, please. Okay, so for the first stage, the CEMP covers mitigation strategies. So long-term improvement planning for projects that can help increase our capabilities in the other areas of emergency management. Projects like this include things like having a camera at one of our storm drains so it doesn't flood out several houses, so we can remove debris. Projects like mapping, so we know evacuation routes. There's a lot of grants for these projects and supplies, so a lot of these are dependent on additional plans, but the big one that the CEMP makes us eligible for is the Emergency Management Performance Grant. I think I put preparedness there, which is a very broad grant that we can use for any emergency management programming. So this year I put in for getting new emergency long-term food storage. So if we did have to staff an emergency operations center for an extended period of time, we can make sure that our staff has food availability. And then if we have enough left over with the grant, just having extra food, water, supplies for our staff to be able to work during a long-term emergency. Next slide, please. So preparedness, one of the biggest ones that it outlines is how we coordinate with the county, the state, and the federal government to build partnerships. The bread and butter of emergency management is knowing who to call to get things, if you were to oversimplify it. So outlining those people and organizations that we should be calling to be able to address particular issues. Another area of preparedness is training program for our staff, which has its own slide in a little bit, so I'll talk a little bit more about that. Exercises, that's one that is required by law every year. We are supposed to test our emergency functions from an emergency management perspective with a exercise every single year, unless there is an emergency declaration. And then community outreach. So during Duval Days, we had a booth with a bunch of emergency preparedness information out during Earth Days, different community events. Next slide, please. So the response plan, the CEMP has how our system uses the incident command structure as a command system for organizing during a disaster when incidents either get much bigger than initially anticipated, or as we're downsizing and closing out an incident at the end. How we coordinate among our department and agencies in the midst of an incident, not just before and after. And then part of this is alert and notification procedures. So how do we get the message out to the community that something's happening, whether it's a wildfire evacuation or a water notice, or just a heat wave and not going in the river when it's super cold in the spring. Next slide, please. And then last, the recovery plan. It outlines what actions we should be taking immediately after a disaster to restore normal functions, how we restore our city long-term. And then it utilizes after action reports, which is the last stage of closing out an incident, to make improvements to our CEMP, other plans, to make sure next time we do better than this time, always. Next slide, please. So as I said, every year we have to do training exercises. This outlines how we meet NIMS standards, which is the National Incident Management System. Incident command structure is part of NIMS. And then this isn't just an example of an exercise. This is one that's coming up in the fall for our staff. This will be our annual one of a simulated dam failure. We'll have about 150 people from partner cities, organizations, utility districts participating in it, and then a bunch of our leadership will be there as well. Next slide, please. So implementing the plan tonight will be hopefully the implementation of this plan adopted. Needs to be reviewed every 5 years. It needs to be reviewed by the state every 5 years. It needs to be reviewed by us at minimum every 2 years. The plan is publicly available for feedback. It will have sections like this to be able to give feedback. Next slide, please. So I talked about how the CEMP is this very broad overarching plan that doesn't go super specific. These are additional plans or annexes that are currently or will be developed to be able to make it a little bit more specific and broad. So continuity of operations and government, the regional hazard mitigation plan, which is currently in progress, evacuation, debris management, volunteer management for if people come and want to help after a disaster during an emergency, credentialing programs to make sure our staff are trained and meet the qualifications for certain specific positions within emergency operations, CEMP, but emergency communications. So that would have prescriptive messaging for public alerts. There's a lot of new research and data coming out how best to alert the public in very simple language to get the message across that something is happening. Unsolicited donations plan, if we're getting money after an incident, how do we manage that? Mass casualty, if we had a large scale incident, how we handle death notifications post-incident. Update our snow management plan. It's pretty recent, but it's going to need an update after our next snowstorm. Hopefully we get an AAR after action report to be able to improve that. And then incident specific standard operating procedures, as I was talking about, going broad to specific. This is almost as specific as it gets. So how do we manage flood day, rain day, landslide, anything like that that's very incident specific to this specific hazard. And then our workplace safety manual is another one to update. Cool, that is it. The next slide says questions, but it's not. I'm gonna take it out.
Thank you so much for the presentation. At this time, I will go ahead and open the. I did open it. Okay. There we go. So at this time, so I'll just, for the record, India for mail, I'm now here. Clerk's purposes. And so if there's anyone here that would like to provide a public comment, now would be the time, and you're welcome to first the podium and provide a comment on the plan. It's okay. It's fine. Not seeing any, so we'll go ahead and close public meeting. And then we will move on to existing business, Agenda Bill 24-38, comprehensive emergency management plan discussion and decision. With our emergency manager, Stevens.
Well, good evening. So, the Eckerd Emergency Management presentation on the emergency plan. Is there any questions? We'd be happy to answer them, or I can answer whatever you can, maybe. So just here to answer any questions and to recommend the approval of the agenda.
Mayor Protem. I don't have a question. I just had to say, I really appreciate all the work that went into this, and I just think it's so well done, and I'm excited that this is done. Has worked enormously hard over the last year to put this together, and I just want to say on behalf of city administration, he's done a phenomenal job. He comes to meetings, he's opened the safety committee, he pays attention to security at City Hall. If there's an issue, Mr. Eckerd is there to help us, and we all really appreciate having him in the city. It's been exciting to have this work done. Councilmember Natalie.
Yeah, it's great. It's exciting to have this done. I have a couple questions. First, there's been a lot of discussion about meeting in EOC. In the past. I don't know if it was technically an EOC, but in emergency, we met over at the fire department headquarters. Maybe things have changed. The administration for our fire department now belongs with Eastside Fire. I don't know, how do you envision? I didn't dive into that section. Do we have a plan? I'm assuming we do. Like, what is our plan for emergencies of where everyone will come together, and do we have a sufficient space at this point?
So the current EOC setup will remain at the fire department.
Okay.
With the backup being at the new public works building, now that it's remodeled, that will have the capabilities to be sufficient for that as well. There might need to be some discussion with fire if your adoption process changes anything, but from my understanding right now, from communications with them, nothing changed.
Okay. I have another question. Anyone else? Councilmember Marshall?
Yeah, you know, again, it sort of echoed the comments that been made tonight. This has been sort of a noticeable gap in terms of the city's resourcing, particularly with all the changes around climate and the encroaching wild areas, as well as just sort of the growth in the population, folks coming in. So again, very much appreciate the work. I guess you touched on this a little bit in terms of particularly the sub appendices. Just if you could just touch briefly on like sort of next steps in terms of as these get built out, you know, the circling back with the council, keeping us informed in terms of communication processes, notification, things of sort, so that we can sort of come along on the journey. I realize a lot of this is still being developed. This sort of addresses some of the core need, and then we'll go forward. But and it doesn't have to obviously be specific, but if there's I guess the best way for us to stay informed in terms of next steps, particularly when you get into some of the more granular preparation.
Yeah, certainly. We can, as plans develop, I can come speak about them. If you have any questions about them, I'm more than happy to communicate as much as possible around their development. And for several trainings and exercises, I would love for council to come participate so that we can practice the way council integrates into the system, because policy direction is part of it. Yeah, I hope that answers that.
It does, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Just want to make sure this wasn't the end state. I knew it wasn't, but I wanted to sort of.
It's an ongoing living document that should be practiced and refined.
Thank you. Any other council members, questions, comments? Seeing none, we'll go back to Councilmember Nathan. So there have been interest in the past, and currently, on if, so I understand we have AEDs within here. This might be one of the sub emergency plans. I'm not sure where that would be or where I should provide that feedback, but in addition to within city buildings, I think there would be interested, potentially Big Rock Ballpark. They do have systems you can purchase that have security cameras, you know, different things for exterior. I've been to ballparks, and I'd love to see something like that. And I don't know where that fits in a goal or a plan or whatever. But it'd be neat to see something like that, especially since we do have interior ones.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, it's not specifically in the CEMP, but it's definitely something that falls under a work on the AED program to get new AEDs for the city. So definitely something we can do, and our staff is having their trainings on CPR and AEDs updated. We only have a few staff left who need to go through the training. So.
Okay. So that's nice. And the last one is she mentioned snow, and at the last, you weren't here at our last major snowstorm, but there was a lot of feedback about sidewalks being blocked with the plowing. And I don't know, once you're here during a snowstorm, you'll see people are out sledding and walking, and it's pretty exciting. And so there were quite a few places where people had to walk in the roadway or couldn't get off the sidewalk to go off the street, they were plowed in. So just there were complaints about that, and concerns, and so I just wanted to provide that.
Yeah, that's a great opportunity where after action reports come in, that's the kind of things that come up and you're like, hey, this particular incident we didn't foresee came up. Let's address it in our planning and make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Great, thank you. Would someone like to make a motion? Councilmember Tebow?
So,
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Thank you so much, Mr. Eckert, for all of the. I know for a fact, but because we're so far out of date with our previous plan, that this wouldn't have happened, without him being here full-time dedicated to this emergency management and safety position in the city of Duval. It was definitely a big gap, and we've seen significant changes and improvements over the last year. So echoing City Administrator McNabb, just thank you so much for all of the work and expertise that you brought to the table, and especially all the trainings that you're doing and giving us up to speed on all of our safety work required for the city as well. So thank you for that. All right, moving on to Agenda Bill 24-45, proposed amendment to DMC 5.10.056, Fire Chief's recommendation to prohibit fireworks discharge for discussion and decision. City Administrator McNabb. Thank you. So in the council packet, you have two things that were requested from our last city council meeting. The first was a proposed change amendment to the ordinance, is code 5.10.056 to offer the fire chief additional flexibility for determining what constitutes fire danger in his or her recommendation to the mayor for a temporary emergency ban. So under 5.2.056, we've made a couple suggested changes. It has gone through legal review by our city attorney. So under the first paragraph, there's an addition of language. It used to read, let's see. The fire chief responsible for the city of Duval's fire protection is requested to make recommendations to prohibit the ignition or discharge of fireworks within the city limits of Duval whenever the fire danger components and indices have reached or exceeded levels as set forth in determining extreme fire danger. Ended there. There's been an additional clause added, or where extenuating emergency conditions seriously impacting public safety and welfare exists. So that's in addition to that paragraph. And then there has been an addition of one additional paragraph and an additional sentence to add more specificity to the term extreme fire danger. So the second paragraph now reads, for the purposes of this section, the term extreme fire danger shall mean a period of hot, dry weather accompanied by low fuel moisture. It is during this period that wildland fires can be expected if fire growth accelerated. And then an additional sentence, extenuating emergency conditions, including predicted hazardous weather and or response resource depletion. So that is the proposed amendments to 5.10.056. The additional request was to put together a public and a community feedback plan so that we could gain community feedback for determining the community's interest in either continuing to support the use of fireworks in Duval or supporting a permanent ban on fireworks. I've put together a flyer, it's in your council packet, of different opportunities for the community to provide feedback. Clerk Otero, do you have that ready to share that? So the first opportunity would be July 17th at Summer Stage. I will be at Summer Stage if council decides to proceed this way to gain city feedback. Today I put together two sets of postcards, one on I support a permanent ban on fireworks, and if you flip the postcard over, I've identified reasons that the community can easily circle, you know, pets, PTSD, fire danger, injury to property, human bodies. So one postcard for supporting them, and then the community can circle reasons that I've put writing. I also made a different postcard that says, I support keeping fireworks in Duval with other articulated reasons similar to what you heard in the public comment. Patriotism, tradition, community interest, revenue generation, so the pro argument for keeping fireworks that you often hear. So the community will have an opportunity to weigh in easily, because it's a low impact entry point, giving feedback. Get a postcard, you sign it, you write cards, and they'll flip. So those will be ready for July 17th. Also identified the farmers market twice. At the council meeting and the public comment period for the August 20th meeting, and then putting together a workshop with additional activities for the October 1st meeting. This is just ideas that I came up with for generating public comment and public feedback. So those are the two things you have in the packet, and certainly open to any questions. Mayor Pro Tem?
I just want to thank you especially for this list of dates and ideas. To me, it's just so robust. There's so many opportunities. It checks all the boxes I have in my head that make me happy with public engagement. And it just makes sure that no matter what the outcome is, that the public feels it was fair and they really had a chance. Like there really were a lot of opportunities to weigh in. So I want to thank you for that. And then for the, I mean, you know, for the recommendation, changes, I'm fine with it the way it is. I saw some interesting comments today and I'm kind of gone back and forth in my head about, I don't want to make it more limited in how it can be used per se. I don't want to take away flexibility, but one thought I had was there's an informative side to it too, where people who are experts in fire might read this and say, I know exactly what we're talking about here. As for the public, might not, when they read hazardous weather, might not always think of the wind or might not think of, you know, different things. So like, do we list, you could always add like including but not limited to, you know, to give examples, but I'm also fine. So just want to.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Supple.
Yeah, I'm fine with the additions to it, but I have a question on the timing. If this agenda bill is adopted tonight, it goes into effect immediately, is that right? Or is there some question as to when all this happens?
So it will go into effect a year from now. So
Okay,
so in 2025, the city of Duval will still have a temporary emergency ban under the amended language. The planning calendar for city council anticipates after this public feedback gathering that we would potentially put on the council agenda for the October, I think it's the 15th, the second meeting in October, a question for council on permanent ban. And that would then go into effect a year from that date, which would then be the 2026 fireworks season.
so 2024 is the existing,
Right now, the
Policy.
existing policy.
2025 would be this if it's approved. And 2026 would be yes or no on fireworks, depending on.
Correct. Councilmember, and then Mercer.
I'm just curious, this new definition of extreme fire danger. Is there any expectation that this new definition would have changed any past decisions that we've made, or is it just trying to make it? It's not making it more restrictive, it's just giving more structure or words. I'm just trying to understand, are we making this more restrictive or are we just clarifying?
It is a little bit of both. I believe that last year we would have banned fireworks under the conditions. Under this ordinance, fireworks would not have been allowed, even women have fires in the city as a result of fireworks. People were following that. So it provides definitely more window and more opportunity. The current code is extremely tight, to the point that it's a huge burden on the city, resources, time-wise, as well as very difficult to educate the public. This one actually provides more window and could potentially provide more time. So for example, if you have June first, the fire district saying that, you know, all fires are banned, et cetera, and you have a forecast for a month out that is extreme heat, you have a month to have that emergency ban be noticed and take effect. So, if Cynthia has more to add, but that's part of the concept behind this.
Is there, I guess I don't see in a red line where there's a window that's changed. Was there a window?
There's
change?
not,
Because
there was not a window, however, because of the standards changing, that window opens much wider as far as the fire science necessary to meet that decision.
So it gives the fire chief, as you heard the last meeting, there's an interest in having a little more flexibility and opportunity to decide based on the fire chief's expertise, what would constitute extreme fire danger. As it was written previously, it is extremely narrow and narrowly defined, meaning you had basically a week to decide whether in the immediate present condition there was extreme fire danger. This allows a little more opportunity for the fire chief, still with the understanding that it has to be extreme, it has to be related to health, life, safety. So it doesn't offer, you know, a huge open window, but it does give a little more flexibility and frankly a little more time for the fire chief to make that determination than the prior ordinance. Well, the prior ordinance didn't have specificity to window. It was interpreted to basically mean the week prior to 4th of July, which was a very tight.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, and I certainly appreciate the additional flexibility that this gives us. We all know, I think, if someone has spent hundreds of dollars potentially on fireworks, and we implement a ban just a few days before the 4th of July, they're gonna shoot the thing. And this extended window, I think, would help people make better decisions because, you know, they haven't necessarily invested.
Councilmember Mercer, I apologize, I skipped over you.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was gonna just, sort of reiterate a little bit is, yeah, my understanding is the existing guidelines were very prescriptive. It needed to check all this very specific boxes as the mayor articulated on a given date. I think this is sort of the right, it's a good sort of middle of the road approach. There is an element of trust with the community that we're not gonna just, as pull this lever as sort of a workaround. And I think that's what I've heard from the mayor and others, that this is still based on a set of scientifically defined criteria. I know that we could tighten that up even more with numeric values, but then you start to get into, again, eliminating just the flexibility that this was intended to add. So, and then I think it's still on the council's, shoulders to have that harder conversations weighing both sides, the public safety, which is sort of paramount to our role and responsibility in the community, but also, be sensitive to organizations like the Civic Club, which fundraise and at least, as at a bare minimum, making sure that we've created a window to take in that feedback. So for me, this is a good sort of transitional step to help with next year. I don't expect this summer to be any cooler than last summer, and I expect next summer to be hotter than this one. So I feel comfortable, more comfortable than I did not having this tool in the toolbox. As we dig a little deeper into the harder question about, a permanent change in policy. So.
So, I'm just trying to, if I didn't realize that this was there could be a larger window or a different window. Do we know how changing when it might be issued would impact fireworks stands or people's? We allow the sale of fireworks, and so do we have a is the window now that you could just decide it whenever, or I'm just thinking about them ordering fireworks and being caught off guard. I don't know if the timeline has changed.
So those are somewhat disassociated decisions. So one is around whether or not we allow the sale of fireworks, which is under a separate provision of the municipal code, and we tend to make that decision within a week of we make it about 2 weeks before because we have to buy the fireworks and apply for a license. We try to make that decision far earlier than whether or not we receive the fire chief's recommendations. And so this would actually allow us to make those decisions in concert with each other, because right now there's some we could have, as Councilmember Schaefer indicated, a decision to right now, for instance, the decision to allow the sale of fireworks happened several weeks ago, several months ago, because we get that license for sale. I think feels like it came in about a month and a half ago. Does that feel right, Clerk Patero?
Maybe a little longer today from
Yeah.
TNT.
However, they could have sold all of that. The community could have purchased all of it in the last week and then wouldn't be able to use it because our window has been 7 days in the past. Now we could allow them to file for the permit with the understanding that probably a month ahead of 4th of July, we could say, hey, we issued the permit, but we don't think we're going to allow fireworks. How does that impact your decision making here? The other thing is Mercer Island, when they did their permanent ban, they banned both because right now they're kind of disassociated inquiries. When you do a permanent ban, you also are likely, but you don't have to, ban the sale of them as well. But again, they're under different municipal codes, and I think when time comes, you can decide how you want to treat them, either together or independently.
So you're saying that 2 weeks, a month before 4th of July, if someone can look at the forecast and say that it's gonna be dry weather, we're banning them, and then it pours down rain the entire week before 4th of July. I guess I'm just trying to understand. I appreciate needing more flexibility, but I worry about that scenario exactly.
I'm not a fire chief or a fire expert. I think there are about a million different iterations of what could happen. We could decide to allow them a month before and then 5 days before have 100-degree weather.
Right. So I think I had before this. I was like,
I just a quick thanks for putting in the fire response resource depletion, the conditions. That was another great addition that I really appreciate. That's very real. It's not a quick one that everyone would think about. You never know what's going on in that pull sources. I had, and a quick thing I did find out today talking to the organizer of the Civic Club that the fireworks are supplement. So that is one good thing for the nonprofits is that they're not outright purchasing, and then whatever company they use takes them back if they're not sold. But my legal question was, if we pass this tonight, knowing it's actually can't be used until July 2nd, could we legally though, if it was looking really dry and like this needs to happen, can we still inform the public that it is going to happen on July 2nd at this time? I wasn't sure what the gray area was if you're allowed to do that, and I thought, oh, that's a great question.
So you turn right.
Yeah, so there are some municipal attorneys who might believe that there is some, in really extreme situations, there might be some inherent authority, and that's a bit of a gray area. But if you were looking at a really dire situation, you could explore that as an option. I would also say that it's really kind of up to using, as far as the existing code language is concerned, it's really up to the fire chief. But if the fire chief were to say in early or mid-June, we think we have a really big problem here. I don't know what would prohibit the city from at least putting people on notice that there might be an emergency order adopted on July 2nd, 2025.
Anyone, Councilmember Marshall?
Yeah, and I was just gonna sort of respond to the comment, because it sounded like there was a little bit of concern about not giving the residents enough sort of heads up. And I, just to reiterate, I think what was just said is that under the current policy, they also could, they could get even less window. So this in anything, in any way is actually expanding the notification window. My, to my earlier comments, you know, my expectation is that this is going to be not done without some level of forethought. It's going to be based on best available science. It's going to be based on, you know, the best forecasting in terms of weather and climate conditions. This year we actually got late rain. You know, next year it could have been dry a month before. So in my mind, this is also actually insulates the community a little bit better in terms of that scenario that was raised. You know, you could buy them and then be told not to use them, whereas this actually kind of expands that runway a little bit. So if the conditions are looking dangerous or more likely to enforce a ban, to actually prevent some of those community purchases that could then end up not being able to be, you know, executed within the community. So that's kind of how I was viewing it.
Yeah, I move to approve agenda bill 2435, approving ordinance 1329, amending the revolving municipal code, chapter 5, John 56, entitled Fire Chief's Recommendation to Prohibit Discharge.
So,
Councilmember Niplin?
I have comment about the outreach that we were doing.
You're welcome to make comments at this point.
The one thing that has come up in the last day, that potentially there's a third option that would be somewhere. So it sounds like we were preparing 2 postcards for people to get feedback, and I do think there potentially could be a middle ground. Type firework, and that's something that I think the community potentially would be interested in. I'm not sure, so I would love to see maybe kind of that middle point where they could say, here are some different options, here are some things other cities have done, and that is something that we had asked for, you know, 4 or 5 months ago, is that if staff could bring back other options, it would be that middle, you know, fireworks that, yeah, just the fountains, the little worms that you like, things that do not explode and will go way up in the air. So I would really like to see how this thing is also discussed and considered by the community.
City Administrator McMahon?
So I don't recall 4 or 5 months ago that being requested. I do recall the last meeting that if we were to put together language for a permanent ban, that we also simultaneously put together language that is a middle approach as well. So that's not tonight. Obviously, tonight is just a temporary ban. We're not really talking about the permanent ban yet, but happy to solicit any feedback on it. They would like.
There's no further questions or comments. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Councilmember. All those opposed, please say no.
No.
The record reflects 1 name by Councilmember Nathland, 5 yeses. With that, we'll move under to closed session under RCW 42.30.140 sub 4 sub 8. There. We do not expect to take further action. Members of the public are welcome to stay. Otherwise, we'll be down for 15 minutes. Yeah, we could start with 15 minutes. Then if we go down 15 minutes, we'll notify the public. And we are now adjourn the meeting.
me.
Council will remain in closed session until 2100 hours. Council will return from session at 21:10. Council will return from closed session at 21:15.
We have resumed the closed session and further business, so unless there are questions, we are now adjourned at 9:16.